My parents sabotaged my scholarship interview to protect my brother's ego, then called me ungrateful when I moved out. Years later, they demanded my success fund his business and tried to blackmail me into coming home. So I brought proof and left the meltdown in front of everyone. Hey, Reddit! My family spent my whole life treating my brother like royalty and me like the extra. So I packed up, walked out, and started building something on my own. But apparently, cutting them off wasn't enough. They had other plans. Before we get into that mess, let me start from the beginning. I'm Nolan Hale. I'm 24 now, and it's been 6 years since I walked out of the bedroom I grew up in. Back then, I thought leaving was the hardest part. Turns out, staying gone was the real test. My dad Richard runs the family like a board meeting. My mom Elaine lives for what the neighbors think. And my brother Oliver, 2 years older, is the golden boy they call Dr. Hale, even though he dropped out of med school after his first year. I've always been the quiet one. I make short films with a secondhand camera and a laptop that barely works. It's not a hobby to me, but Dad calls it that. If it doesn't come with a paycheck, it's a waste of time to him. Mom says I'm too sensitive. Oliver calls it playing pretend. For 6 months, I'd been preparing for a national film scholarship. Industry mentors, funding, real projects. I'd shot 2 short films and had an interview lined up for Thursday night. I'd arranged time off work and borrowed a jacket to look presentable. 3 days before the interview, Dad brought up a family obligation at dinner. The logistics company was sponsoring a banquet in Oliver's name. Apparently, his research project, which was really just a summer internship, was being recognized. They'd booked tables, invited old colleagues, the works. The banquet, same night as my interview. I told them I couldn't make it. Dad put his fork down and gave me that look like I'd just insulted him. Family comes first, he said. This scholarship could set up my career, I said back. Career? He laughed. You mean your editing? Nolan, be serious. You'll have plenty of chances to talk about your little videos. Mom chimed in about how it would look bad if I skipped. Oliver just smirked and said, it's not like anyone will miss you there. I tried to argue, but there's no point when Dad decides something. If you don't agree, you're selfish. If you push back, you're ungrateful. So I showed up at that stupid banquet, clapping along while Oliver gave a speech about future medical breakthroughs and listening to Dad brag about his 2 successful sons to people who didn't know the truth. I missed the interview. No reschedules, no second chances. I emailed them begging for another chance. They replied 3 days later. They'd already moved forward with other candidates. 6 months of work, gone. A week later, I saw a post online. Oliver had submitted a short film to a regional contest. It won first place. The screenshots looked familiar, so I downloaded the video. It wasn't just familiar, it was mine. Same shots, same edits, even the original file names in the metadata. He'd taken my entire scholarship project, tweaked the opening credits, and put his name on it. The contest was small, maybe 40 submissions from a local business group. Nobody there knew about my scholarship application. Perfect place for him to steal it without getting caught. I confronted him in the kitchen. You stole my work. He barely looked up from his phone. If it was really yours, they'd know. Guess they thought it was mine. You had no right. Don't be dramatic, Nolan. It's just a video. You should be happy it won something. I turned to Mom and Dad, expecting some kind of reaction. Dad folded his newspaper like I was interrupting something important. Oliver's been under a lot of pressure, he said. It's good for him to get a win. And you, Mom added, should learn to share. This family supports each other. Share? It was the hours I spent filming after midnight. The editing I did while my hands shook from too much caffeine. The stories I wanted to tell. And they were calling it sharing. I walked to my room and sat on the floor staring at my hard drive. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was how things had always been. By the time the sun came up, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to do it again. I wasn't going to beg for them to see me. If they wanted Oliver to be the only son worth anything, fine. They could have him. I was done. I left that house the same night. I didn't slam doors or yell, I just packed a camera bag, a duffel with clothes, my hard drive, and the laptop. That was it. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. Don't wait up. I'm done. And walked out without looking back. The first 2 nights I crashed on a coworker's couch. It was cramped and awkward, but I didn't care. It was still better than sleeping under the same roof as people who treated me like I was nothing. On the 3rd day, I found a listing for a tiny apartment on the east side. It was a rundown 2-bedroom with peeling paint, a leaky faucet, and paper-thin walls. But the rent was low enough that I could afford it if I kept working. The other room was already taken by a guy named Luke Carter. Luke was 28, a couple of years older than Oliver. He used to run a small tech startup, but his uncle pushed him out when it started doing well. He told me that on the first night over takeout boxes and cheap pizza, family will screw you faster than strangers, he said. Not bitter, just stating it like a fact. We clicked right away. Luke was blunt, sarcastic, and had this calm way of talking about things that made them feel less overwhelming. Over time, he became more like the older brother I wished I'd had, the kind who gives real advice and doesn't treat you like a punchline. Life got busy fast. I picked up a morning job at a small coffee shop near the apartment, then did evening shifts delivering food. Most nights, I came home past midnight, grabbed a quick shower, and worked on videos until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I started a film channel under a fake name and posted weekly. First video got 60 views, then 112, then 74. Luke gave me notes on pacing when we watched them together. A few weeks after I moved out, Aunt Linda called. She was the only one in the family who ever treated me like I was more than Oliver's shadow. "I heard you left," she said gently. "I'm proud of you, Nolan." It was 2 sentences, but it meant more than any fake, "we're proud" text my parents ever sent. She asked if I needed anything. I told her no, not because I didn't, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could figure it out on my own. The first months were rough. Rent ate my paycheck. I lived on instant noodles. My editing setup barely worked. But it was mine, it was quiet, and no one told me I was wasting my time. Then something changed. I made a short called Night Shift. It followed a janitor, a nurse, and a delivery driver working through the night in the same city, but never crossing paths. It was simple, raw, and honest. I posted it like usual and forgot about it. A week later, I got an email from the city's Arts Council. Someone on their panel had seen Night Shift and shared it internally. They wanted to award me a small arts grant and pair me with a mentor at a local film incubator. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes. The grant covered gear and rent, but the mentorship was the real prize. Access to professional editors and real feedback. When I told Luke, he grinned like he'd won the lottery. "This is it, man," he said. "This is how it starts." Aunt Linda cried when I called her. "I knew you'd make something of yourself," she said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. The grant was $8,000 over 6 months. Half went to rent and bills. The rest went to basic gear upgrades and festival fees. Not luxury money, just breathing room. For the first time, I felt like things might actually go somewhere. I wasn't just chasing something, I was catching it. A week after my short film started getting some attention, my mom texted me out of nowhere. "We're so proud of you. Come home soon." It felt fake, too smooth, too cheerful. I ignored it. 2 days later, Dad followed with, "It's time to come home and do something useful with your life." That one made me laugh. Useful to him always meant something that benefits Oliver. I didn't reply. I found out later how they even knew about any of it. Aunt Linda had shared one of my short films on Facebook, just trying to be supportive, and Mom saw it. That's how she learned about the grant, the incubator mentorship, and everything else I was working toward. I guess she told Oliver because not long after, things started to go sideways. The first hit came in the form of an email. "We've received an anonymous complaint regarding your financial disclosures. Your grant will be paused pending review." It was from the Arts Council. Apparently, someone had reported me for lying on my application and misusing funds. They wouldn't say who, but I didn't have to guess. I sent them every invoice, receipt, and transaction I had, but the money was frozen until they finished reviewing. Then came the next blow. A video started circulating on social media, an edited clip that made it look like I'd admitted to stealing footage from another filmmaker. It was a sloppy cut-up of sentences from different behind-the-scenes videos I'd posted. The voice was mine, but the message wasn't. I figured no one would take it seriously. I was wrong. The comments were brutal. Fraud. Scammer. Fake. Sponsors ghosted me. A gear company suddenly pulled their offer. Someone was tanking my reputation. A few days later, a friend from the incubator sent me a link to a film festival's submission list. I scrolled down and froze. There it was. My concept, my script, even the working title, submitted under Oliver's name. He'd taken another unfinished project from my shared cloud folder and submitted it before I could. I was furious. Luke tried to calm me down. "You're not going to win this by reacting," he said. "That's what he wants. You need to think bigger." I knew he was right, but it still made me sick. Then everything escalated. I came home from a delivery shift one night and saw our apartment door slightly open. Inside was chaos. My editing setup was trashed, drawers were emptied, memory cards gone, camera lenses shattered. On my desk was a piece of paper with 4 words in thick black marker: "Stay in your lane." I called the police. They came, took photos, got my statement. No forced entry, no witnesses, no evidence of who did it. Without proof, one cop said. Especially if it's family, this is tough to pursue. The next morning, Luke found a camera wedged near the window, pointing into our living room. We'd been watched for weeks. The camera felt calculated, hidden carefully, covered in dust like it had been there a while. But the break-in felt different, angry, sloppy. My guess? Oliver planted the camera when he thought he was being smart. The break-in happened when he lost control. That changed everything. It wasn't jealousy anymore. This was deliberate, planned. Someone, and we both knew who, was trying to scare me into quitting. And for a while, it almost worked. I stopped uploading. I'd sit at my desk and stare at my blank timeline without touching a thing. My drive to work on anything evaporated. A part of me even thought about deleting the channel, selling my gear, and finding a job that didn't make me a target. But every time I considered giving up, I thought about that note. Stay in your lane. That's what they wanted. For me to shrink back down and disappear so Oliver could keep pretending I didn't matter. One night, Luke walked into my room holding 2 coffees. If you're gonna quit, do it because you want to, he said. Not because some spoiled idiot smashed your stuff. He was right. I wasn't going to hand them that win. The next morning, I opened a new project file and typed the title, Negative Space. This wasn't going to be another short film. It would be a full documentary, not just about me, but about people who'd had their work stolen, their names dragged, their reputations trashed. People who were told to stay in their lane. I started outlining interviews, scripting voiceovers, and piecing together the story. Every message, every screenshot, every suspicious upload. I started cataloging it all. I quit the delivery job and kept the coffee shop. Luke covered part of my rent for a few months. The documentary took 4 months. Filming on weekends, editing after shifts, all-nighters twice a week. My mentor let me use the incubator's studio and software. Without that, my laptop would have died halfway through. Because I wasn't staying in the lane he built anymore. I was paving my own. The first thing Luke said when I told him about the documentary idea was, if you're going to do this, do it smart. No angry rants, no half-baked evidence. You need receipts for everything. And that's exactly where we started. We spent the next few nights turning my mess into a plan. Luke helped me organize every piece of proof I already had. Screenshots of the fake video posts, timestamps from when Oliver uploaded stolen footage, emails from the grant committee, and text messages from my parents that tried to guilt me into coming home. We created a timeline, line by line, from the night I left my parents' house to the vandalism in my apartment. We upgraded security first. Luke installed a better lock and motion sensors. We also backed up all my work on encrypted drives. One stayed hidden in the apartment, another went to Aunt Linda's place. She offered to keep it safe without asking too many questions. She was the only one who didn't need the full story to understand why I didn't trust anyone else. Luke traced the anonymous tip email to my hometown. We combed through metadata on the stolen files. They still had my original creation dates. The most surprising evidence came from Aunt Linda. She was looking through old family photos on the shared cloud everyone forgot about. She found a folder labeled N Projects, drafts of posts attacking me, the fake video files, even a document called Reputation Management Strategy. Oliver had used it as backup and never cleaned it out. Kept all the evidence because he never thought he'd get caught. I reached out to the mentor from the incubator, who had offered guidance when I won the grant. I explained what was happening without giving too many details and asked for advice. She told me to talk to a lawyer who specialized in creative property and digital rights. She even recommended one. He worked on contingency for the IP theft. No upfront cost. For everything else, I paid $200 a month. Luke kicked in $800 for filing fees and told me to shut up when I tried to pay him back. The lawyer's advice was simple. Don't go public yet. The more you talk online, the more they can twist. Build your case quietly. Then when you move once, and hard. He helped me start a formal process for a demand letter against Oliver for intellectual property theft and defamation. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was the first legal step. I started filming Negative Space. Not me crying, but how this happens to anyone building something. I filmed night shifts, interviewed other creators who'd been plagiarized, and captured my empty desk where the broken gear used to sit. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't even polished, but it was honest. And that was the point. I posted a 3-minute preview, break-in clips, screenshots, a voiceover about envy. A film blog picked it up. Views jumped from hundreds to tens of thousands. The attention brought new opportunities. A small documentary collective reached out to offer feedback. They even asked if I'd consider submitting negative space to a festival they partnered with. I wasn't ready yet, but I thanked them. The idea of my story reaching a real audience made me work harder. The documentary collective waived my submission fee through a festival partnership. Without that, I couldn't have afforded the $75 entry. Then came the email I wasn't expecting. A major independent film festival accepted negative space for its upcoming showcase. I stared at the message for a full minute before I believed it. My first feature-length project, born from sabotage and anger, was going to screen in front of real critics and industry people. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, because just a few hours after that email arrived, I got another one from my mom. We're hosting a family dinner this weekend. Your father says we can help repair your reputation if you're willing to be reasonable. A separate message from Dad followed. We can fix this. Let's talk like adults. There was no apology. No mention of the vandalism, the theft, the lies. Just another attempt to make me feel like I needed them. I showed the text to Luke. He raised an eyebrow. They're scared, he said, and they're trying to pull you back in before you do something they can't control. I agreed to go, but not for reconciliation. I wanted information. I wanted their words recorded. Luke and I planned it out. I'd wear a small recorder in my pocket, and he'd sit in the car outside with a laptop marking timestamps as I texted him coded messages. The plan wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about being prepared. By the time dinner day arrived, negative space was deep in production. I had hours of footage, more evidence than I'd ever imagined, and a legal path starting to form. For the first time since leaving home, I didn't feel powerless. And this dinner wasn't going to change that. They thought they were pulling me back under their control. What they didn't know was that I was finally ready to expose everything, and I wasn't going to do it with yelling or revenge posts. I was going to do it with proof. I showed up to the dinner at my parents' house on a cold Sunday evening. I hadn't been there since the night I left, and it felt strange standing on the same front porch I used to race up as a kid. Mom opened the door before I could even knock. "Nolan," she said, smiling like we were long-lost friends. She pulled me into a hug that lasted too long and felt fake from start to finish. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. My old photo from middle school still hung in the hallway, crooked and forgotten, like they'd never noticed it was tilted. Dinner was already set. A long table covered with too many dishes for 4 people. Dad sat at the head of the table with a glass of water, scrolling through his phone. Oliver leaned back in his chair, phone in hand too, acting bored like he was doing me a favor by even being there. "Glad you could finally make time for family," Dad said without looking up. "Glad you invited me," I said, keeping my voice even. The small talk started right away. Questions about my little videos, comments about how I must be busy with all my online stuff. It was their way of downplaying everything without sounding obvious. I didn't bite. I answered each question calmly and kept my tone neutral. I knew every word mattered now, and I wanted them all on record. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and set his phone down. "Let's talk about why we're really here," he said. "Your mother and I think it's time you started thinking about the future, about the family's future." I almost laughed. "And what exactly does that mean?" Mom leaned forward, folding her hands. "Oliver is starting a medical consulting practice," she said, as if the words were sacred. "It's an exciting opportunity, but he can't do it alone. We were thinking, maybe you could partner with him." "Partner how?" I asked, though I already knew. "You have a platform," Dad said. "A growing one. You could handle marketing, media, outreach, all that stuff you're good at. And in return, you'd be part of something bigger than your online projects." For years, they called my work a hobby. Now that Oliver needed help and I had an audience, suddenly it was a valuable skill. They didn't respect what I did. They just saw something they could use. Oliver smirked. "And let's be honest, Nolan, that whole plagiarism scandal and grant thing didn't do your reputation any favors. Partnering with me could help clean that up." I stared at him. "You mean the plagiarism scandal you caused?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "Water under the bridge. People forget things, but they don't forget when you're connected to someone successful." I took a slow breath. "So let me get this straight. You want me to use my work and name to boost Oliver's business so I can fix a problem he created?" Mom jumped in quickly. "This is a chance to put the past behind us. We're family, Nolan. Families help each other." I kept my voice steady. "When I was struggling to pay rent, where was that help? When my work was stolen, where was the help then?" Dad frowned. "You're being dramatic. We've always supported you. We gave you everything you needed." "You gave Oliver everything," I said, "and you blamed me for being upset about it." The room went quiet for a moment. Mom tried to recover with a softer tone. "We're trying to build a bridge here. Don't ruin it with bitterness. I leaned back in my chair. Bitterness isn't the problem. Reality is. That's when Dad slid a folder across the table. We had a draft agreement drawn up, he said. Just a basic family partnership document. Read it over. I opened it. The terms were vague and one-sided. It gave Oliver control over branding, content, and revenue decisions. My name was mentioned once, under marketing support. It was a joke. I closed the folder. I'll look at it, I said flatly, slipping it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't signing anything, but I wanted the document. It could be useful later. As we wrapped up dinner, Oliver followed me to the hallway while I was putting on my coat. You're not as important as you think you are, he said quietly. You can't win without us. I met his eyes. We'll see. He smiled that same smug smile he'd worn my entire life. Good luck with your little film thing. Hope it works out. Outside, the air felt colder than when I arrived. Luke was parked down the block, waiting in the car with his laptop open. I slid into the passenger seat and handed him a small piece of paper with a timestamp on it. He nodded. Every significant part of that conversation was recorded and marked. How'd it go? He asked. They want me to build Oliver's business for him, I said. And they think I owe them for everything they've done. Luke snorted. That's not surprising. But we got what we needed. Every word, I said. That night, I uploaded the audio files to an encrypted folder and sent a backup to the lawyer. I didn't feel satisfied or victorious. If anything, I felt numb. But I knew one thing for sure. They weren't trying to make peace. They were trying to pull me back under their control before I got too far away from them. And they still didn't understand. That control was gone. They just didn't know it yet. The day of the film festival felt like the biggest day of my life, and the scariest. Negative Space was finally finished. Luke and I arrived early. He helped me set up the small booth they gave us in the networking area. I printed a simple flyer. Negative Space. A story about betrayal, ownership, and building something from nothing. Nothing fancy. I just wanted people to understand what it felt like to be stepped on and still keep building. The screening was in one of the mid-sized auditoriums, and to my surprise, it was almost full. A few students, some local filmmakers, a handful of critics, even a couple of producers I recognized from YouTube projects I'd followed. I sat near the back with Luke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The lights dimmed, and the opening scene played. A shot of my broken desk, memory cards scattered on the floor, that note taped to the wall, stay in your lane. Then came interviews. A musician whose song was stolen and re-released under a label's name. A photographer whose work was reposted thousands of times without credit. A designer whose brother claimed his portfolio as his own. And woven between their stories was mine. Not exaggerated, not dramatized, just facts, supported with emails, screenshots, timestamps, and video evidence. When the credits rolled, there was silence. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite clapping, but the kind that grows louder because people mean it. A couple of folks stood up. Someone yelled, "That was incredible!" I just sat there frozen, trying to process it. Afterward, people came up to talk. A small indie studio asked if I'd consider expanding Negative Space into a series. A journalist from an online film magazine asked if they could interview me. Even a documentary festival coordinator handed me a card and said, "We'd love to feature this next year." It was overwhelming, in the best way. Then, as Luke and I were packing up, I saw them. My parents. Oliver, standing by the exit, watching the crowd around me. My stomach turned. Of course they showed up. Of course they couldn't just stay away. Mom was the first to speak. "We saw your film," she said. "It was intense. Honest," I corrected. Dad crossed his arms. "You made us look like monsters. I didn't make you look like anything." I showed what happened. Oliver stepped forward. "You could have handled this privately." I laughed once. "You made fake videos about me, broke into my place, and stole my work. You don't get to lecture me about private." He flinched, but didn't back down. "You're not going to get away with this." Get away with what? Telling the truth? That's when Dad tried a different tactic. "You've embarrassed this family. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" "Yeah," I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. That's the point. I walked away before they could say anything else. I didn't owe them a debate. The article about the film dropped 2 days later. It went viral on social media. The brutally honest documentary everyone should watch. It wasn't trending numbers, but it was everywhere in the creative community. Not mainstream viral. The average person had no idea who I was. But in indie film circles and creative spaces where Oliver was trying to build a career, his name was toast. My parents didn't get it. They thought they still had leverage because the documentary hadn't reached their social circle. They didn't realize the game had already changed. The message hit people hard. I got emails from strangers thanking me for saying what they couldn't. A few even shared their own stories of family members or companies stealing their work. I didn't hear from Oliver for months. Aunt Linda said he tried claiming I edited things out of context, but other people he'd screwed over started coming forward. His name became a joke in creative circles. She told me he threw a glass at a family dinner and screamed that I'd ruined his life. Dad had the stroke a few weeks after that. The attention brought more than just praise. The lawyer called me to say our case had gotten stronger. The stolen footage, the fake plagiarism claims, the vandalism, the messages, it was all now part of an official civil suit. Oliver was being served. And because my parents had defended and enabled him, they were being named too. The fallout was immediate. Oliver's film festival submission was disqualified after the organizers saw the evidence. The medical consulting practice he'd been planning suddenly lost investors. Even a clinic he'd been trying to partner with backed out. Word travels fast when you're caught lying. Then came the message I never expected. Aunt Linda texted me. Your mom called. They're panicking. They want to talk before the lawsuit goes any further. I ignored it. A few hours later, Dad called. Then Mom. Then Oliver. I let every call go to voicemail. If they wanted to talk, they could do it through lawyers now. One night, about a week after the festival, I was working on a new project when Luke walked into the room with a grin. You're not going to believe this, he said, tossing his phone on the desk. It was a news article. Viral documentary inspires new funding for Creative Rights Initiative. A nonprofit had launched a grant to help small creators fight legal battles over stolen work, and they credited Negative Space as the inspiration. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing that something I made in a tiny apartment with borrowed gear was now sparking real change. Of course, my parents tried one last trick. A long, carefully written email showed up a few days later. We're sorry for how things turned out. We never meant to hurt you. Can we meet and talk about this? I read it once and deleted it, because the truth was, I didn't need them to understand anymore. I didn't need them to see my side or feel guilty. The damage was done, and now they had to live with the consequences, just like I had to live with theirs. The night before the lawsuit papers were officially filed, Luke and I stood on the balcony of our apartment. The city buzzed below us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. This is just the start, he said. Yeah, I replied, watching the lights in the distance. But this time, I'm writing the story. The lawsuit was moving forward, slow but steady. Oliver's lawyer tried to settle twice, both times with insulting offers that basically said, let's pretend none of this happened. My lawyer rejected both. We weren't after a payout. We wanted accountability. The civil suit for defamation, theft of intellectual property, and property damage was strong. The digital forensics, the emails, the break-in evidence, the fake videos, it was airtight. Their defense strategy was basically, he's exaggerating, and that wasn't going to hold up. Then, one rainy night in late November, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Oliver was standing there, soaking wet, looking nothing like the arrogant version of himself I'd grown up with. He'd lost weight. His hands shook. This wasn't the same guy. This was someone who'd finally realized he put himself at rock bottom. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his face looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I hesitated, but stepped aside. He walked in slowly, scanning the place like he was searching for the version of me he used to know. I offered him a towel. He didn't take it. Dad's been sick, he said after a long pause. Stroke. Not too bad, but he's not the same. Mom's. She's not handling it well. I nodded. I heard. He rubbed his face. Everything's falling apart. Investors bailed. My name's trashed. Nobody wants to work with me. I can't even get interviews because every search result is about your documentary or the lawsuit. I leaned against the counter. That's what happens when you spend your whole life thinking you're untouchable. He flinched. I know I screwed up. Screwed up? I said, my voice low but steady. You didn't just screw up, Oliver. You tried to destroy me. You broke into my home. You spread lies. You stole my work. You watched me through a camera. And you never once thought you were wrong. He didn't argue. He just stood there, eyes red, staring at the floor. I thought I was supposed to be the successful one, he whispered. That's what they always told me. If you started doing better than me, then what was I? I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe he didn't either. After a long silence, he finally said, I'm sorry. Not because of the lawsuit, or because my life's falling apart. I'm sorry, because I treated you like you were less than me. You never were. For a second, I almost believed it. But part of me also knew this was probably too late. You don't undo years of damage with one apology. Still, hearing it mattered. Not for him, but for me. I appreciate you saying that, I said. But sorry doesn't erase what you did, and it doesn't mean I'll drop the lawsuit. He nodded. I know. I'm not asking you to. We stood there for a while, the rain hitting the windows, neither of us really knowing what to say. Before he left, he turned to me one last time. I'm leaving town, starting over somewhere else. I don't think anyone here will ever forget what I did. Maybe that's a good thing, I said. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. I never saw him again after that night. Aunt Linda told me later that he moved to another state and was working under a different name. I didn't feel happy or angry, just done. Like that part of my life was finally sealed shut. The lawsuit wrapped up a few months later. We won. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. Oliver and my parents had to pay damages, issue a public apology, and remove any remaining false content. More importantly, there was now a permanent legal record of what happened, something they couldn't rewrite or deny. Life after that felt lighter. I released another project, a short series exploring creative ownership in the digital age, and it gained even more traction than Negative Space. My following grew, and so did the opportunities. I was invited to speak on panels, collaborate with other filmmakers, and mentor younger creators who'd been through similar situations. Every time someone told me, "Your story made me keep going," I remembered all the nights I almost gave up. 5 years after Negative Space first screened, I held a small gathering in my studio. Just a handful of close friends, Luke, Aunt Linda, and a few people I'd met along the way. We ordered takeout, drank coffee, and watched the film together. Near the end, Luke raised his glass and said, "To staying out of lanes." We all laughed, but I knew what he meant. I'd spent most of my life being told where I did and didn't belong. And now, finally, I was living entirely on my own terms. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked out over the city. It was quiet, just the faint hum of traffic below. I thought about the scared 18-year-old kid who left home with a backpack and $1,200. I thought about the smashed camera gear, the fake videos, the betrayal, and every single time someone told me I wasn't enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I remembered it. I felt grateful, because if they hadn't tried to break me, I never would have learned how strong I was. If they hadn't taken everything, I never would have built something that was truly mine. And standing there, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won. They had to live with what they'd done. I got to live with what I'd built, and that was more than enough. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. We picked the better child, my family bragged. After dumping me at 12, now they're broke, and that better child is mopping bathroom floors. Hey Reddit, I, 21 male, Jacob, was always the extra kid my parents kept around until they figured out where else to stick me. My sister was the golden child, and I was basically the family's spare part. Years later, she comes at me with a ridiculous request. My parents jump in, and things take a very entertaining turn. Let's just say I got the last laugh, and it may or may not have involved a mop, a blue uniform, and me trying not to pass out from laughing. From the start, it was obvious who was the star of the show. My twin sister, Madison, 21 female, blonde hair, green eyes, dimples, all that angel child stuff people gush over. Every time someone met us, it was, "Oh, she's gorgeous," followed by, "And that's her brother." Like I was her chauffeur or something. My parents, Steve and Sydney, ate it up. If Madison so much as burped politely, she was graceful. If I did anything, lazy, unmotivated, a problem. And I'm not exaggerating. One year for Christmas, she got an iPad and I got socks. Not nice socks. Clearance socks. 2 sizes too small. They loved pointing out that I was darker skinned than Madison. She got mom's light skin and dad's light eyes. I got me. Guess which one fit better into their family photo aesthetic? Spoiler. Not the kid who got told to stand in the back so the lighting doesn't wash out your sister's face. Growing up, I became the designated errand boy. If they needed someone to clean the garage, me. Madison's turn to do dishes? No, she had homework, so I did them. Family trips? Oh, I was invited, but only to carry luggage and take pictures of everyone else having fun. The thing that still makes my eye twitch? I was never allowed in certain family pictures. They'd literally do 2 versions, one with Madison front and center, one with just her. My version didn't exist. Now, the day they officially decided they were done with me was almost comical. I was 12. Madison was 12. We both had a school recital coming up. I didn't want to wear the itchy, too tight suit Mom picked out for me. I told her it was uncomfortable and asked if I could wear something else. Something that fit. That's it. That's the crime. I didn't want to look like I was going to court for tax fraud. Mom had a full meltdown. Dad backed her up, saying I was ungrateful and embarrassing the family. Next thing I know, they're saying, you know what? Maybe it's better if you go live with Uncle Rick and Aunt Karen for a while. A while turned into forever. Here's the part that makes it worse. They didn't hide the reason. A week later, I overheard my mom on the phone saying, we decided to keep the better child. That's me they're talking about. Or rather, not me. Uncle Rick and Aunt Karen, Dad's brother and his wife, were stunned. They weren't rich, but they were decent human beings. When they picked me up, they told me I'd have my own room, my own space, and that I wouldn't be treated like baggage. My parents barely said goodbye. Madison waved at me from the porch like I was going on a school trip. The last thing my mom said? Don't cause them as much trouble as you caused us. That was it. No hug, no, we'll miss you. Just a final jab to remember them by. The first night with Uncle Rick and Aunt Karen, I realized how different life could be. They actually asked if I was hungry. They didn't compare me to Madison once. They didn't care what I wore as long as it was clean. They treated me like I was part of the family, which was honestly weird at first because I wasn't used to it. But the messed up part? Even though I was gone, my parents still found ways to remind me I was the reject. They'd send me cards on Madison's birthday with pictures of her all grown up while casually leaving out any mention of me. My favorite was the time they mailed me a family photo where they'd cropped me out. You could still see my hand on Madison's shoulder. Classy. I used to think maybe it was me. Maybe I was the problem kid. But living with Rick and Karen showed me it wasn't. Turns out if you treat a kid like they matter, they actually act like they matter. So yeah, that's how I became the spare twin. No dramatic courtroom custody battles. No tragic accidents. Just two parents deciding one kid looked better on their Christmas cards than the other. And honestly, it was the best thing they could have done for me. Because while Madison was busy being groomed as the golden child, I got out. I got to live with people who didn't care how I looked in photos. And one day, I was going to make sure that decision, their choice to dump me, was the thing that came back to bite them hardest. So I figured moving with Uncle Rick and Aunt Karen would be the end of it. They tossed me out, so why would they care what I did? Yeah, turns out my parents weren't the let it go type. They were the throw something in the trash and then complain the trash doesn't send them thank you notes type. The first weird move they pulled came that Christmas. Rick brings in a stack of mail, hands me a card with my name on it. I open it up, and it's a glossy photo of my parents and Madison in matching sweaters, holding a golden retriever I'd never seen before. Big letters on the front. Merry Christmas from our perfect family. My name wasn't even printed inside. Just a Sharpie note. You'd look better in this picture if you tried harder. Merry freaking Christmas. Then they got creative. On my 14th birthday, a box shows up. Inside, a single cupcake. No frosting, no note. Just a candle jammed in the middle. And I knew instantly, this wasn't them remembering my birthday. It was their way of saying, you're not worth an actual cake. Another time, a padded envelope showed up with a gift inside. My old participation ribbon from 3rd grade, burnt on the edges. I guess they thought that would really stick it to me. This stuff wasn't for me. It was for them. They weren't trying to reconnect. They weren't even trying to hurt me in a way that made sense. They just wanted to make sure I never forgot I was the discarded one. It was about spite, nothing else. The weirdest part? The harassment was organized. I'd get something from Madison, then a week later something from Mom, then something from Dad. Like they had a harassment schedule on the fridge. One even mailed me a flash drive. I plugged it in, huge mistake, and it was a slideshow of Madison's accomplishments. School awards, vacation photos, her holding trophies, all set to this corny, inspirational music. I couldn't even get through it without laughing. By 15, it went physical. Twice they showed up. First time, I come home from school. Rick standing on the porch holding a big framed photo. My parents had just left it there. It was their updated family portrait, just the 3 of them and the dog. In the frame behind the glass, taped in the corner, was a tiny baby photo of me, with a red X drawn through it. Second time, I'm walking home, see a car parked near the corner. Madison's leaning out the window holding a giant sign that says, "Need money? Ask your real family." Couple kids from school were behind me. They saw the whole thing. Madison waved like she was at a parade. I didn't even react, just kept walking. I think me not caring pissed her off more than anything. The last straw came a few months later. A package shows up. Big box, heavy. I open it and find a shoebox inside, filled with dirt and trash. On top of the dirt, a note that read, "This is all you'll ever be worth to us." Rick nearly called the cops. I told him not to bother. I didn't want them to think they'd gotten a reaction. But in my head, I decided something important. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to keep receipts. Every insult, every petty stunt, all stored away for the day I'd finally use them. By then, even Rick and Karen were saying, they're not going to stop unless you cut every line of contact. So I did. New number, privacy lock on school records, mail forwarded to a P.O. box. For about a year, things were quiet. No cards, no packages, no parade stunts. I almost thought they'd finally moved on. But here's what I've learned about people like my parents and Madison. They don't reach out because they miss you. They reach out because they want something. And when that something showed up years later, it came with a phone call from Madison herself, acting like we were best friends. I knew it was bad news before I even picked up. I'd changed my number years ago after the dirt in a box stunt, so she must have sweet-talked a cousin or guilt-tripped some relative into giving it to her. First off, her name showing up on my phone was like seeing IRS Audit Department pop up in your caller ID. You're not getting good news. Second, I hadn't heard from her in years. The last time she'd contacted me, she was holding that giant "Need money? Ask your real family" sign out of a car window. So yeah, I wasn't exactly expecting a heart-to-heart, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what angle she was working this time. I answer. Her voice is syrupy sweet, fake cheerful, like you know the way the Kardashians talk? Yeah, that tone. Hey, it's been forever. How are you? I play along. Let me guess. This call ends with you asking for money? She laughs like I'm joking. Oh, stop. Seriously, though. I've been thinking about you. We should catch up. Which is Madison speak for. I want something. I just didn't know what it was yet. We do the awkward dance for about 2 minutes. Her talking about her busy life, me giving short answers. Then she goes in for the kill. So, I heard Uncle Rick got some money from Grandma and Grandpa? Bingo. I keep my tone flat. Yeah, they left a trust in my name that Rick managed. He just transferred it to me a few months ago, so it's mine. Well, I just thought, since we're twins and all, it would make sense to split it. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. Split my inheritance? That's cute. She didn't laugh back. I'm serious, Jacob. We're family. Family shares. I could feel my jaw tightening. Funny, you didn't want to share when I was eating dinner alone in the kitchen, so you could sit at the good table. God, you're so dramatic, she says, instantly shifting into that tone she used as a kid, the one that made everything I said sound like I was crazy. This is about doing the right thing. I need this money for college. Oh, I said. You mean the college you could have paid for with the fund Mom and Dad set up? The one Mom told Rick about before I heard from a cousin you blew it on handbags and a trip to Italy silence. That hit. Then she snaps back. That was different. I was living my life. You've had it easy with Rick and Karen. You don't need all that money. The audacity actually made me laugh again. Let me get this straight. You waste your own college fund, and now you think you're entitled to mine. Because I had the easy life with the people who actually wanted me? You're being selfish, she says. If the roles were reversed, I'd help you. Oh yeah? I said. That's funny. Because when I asked to borrow your graphing calculator in high school, you told me to buy my own. But now I'm supposed to fund your entire future? Her voice goes from sweet to sharp. If you're not going to do the right thing, maybe Mom and Dad should talk to you. I smirked. Go for it. Haven't talked to them in a while. Should be fun. Click. She hangs up. 48 hours later, my phone starts blowing up. First it's my mother, then my father, then some aunt I don't even remember meeting. All with the same script. It's your duty to help your sister. You wouldn't even have the life you do without us. Without them. The same people who dumped me at their brother's house like I was a broken toaster. One voicemail from my dad actually said, "You're still my son, so I have a right to ask this of you." Which was hilarious, because the only time he's ever used the word son with me is when he's trying to guilt trip me. One even sent me a link to a GoFundMe Madison made titled, "Help me get to college. My brother won't help." The description was pure gold. My twin brother was given a huge sum of money, but refuses to share with me, even though he knows how important my education is. He's had it easy his whole life while I've struggled. Struggled. The girls' struggle involved an all-inclusive resort in the Maldives last summer. The best part? The GoFundMe had a picture of her standing next to a BMW. Her BMW. At this point, I wasn't mad. I was impressed. Madison's entitlement wasn't just normal golden child energy, it was Olympic level. The confidence it takes to blow your own money, beg for someone else's, and still act like you are the victim, that's a skill. Rick and Karen were ready to call her themselves and shut it down, but I told them to hold off. Something in me had shifted during that phone call. I'd spent years cutting them off to avoid their chaos. Now, I kind of wanted to lean into it. Not because I was going to give them a dime, because I realized Madison had just given me the perfect setup. Here she was, openly lying about why she needed the money. Here my parents were, backing her up like the loyal little enablers they've always been. And here I was, with the receipts, literal and digital, proving she was full of it. So instead of blocking their calls, I started answering them, letting them rant, acting like I was thinking it over. I saved every bit of it. Screenshots, voicemails, the GoFundMe link. I even had a mutual friend send me screenshots of her bragging about her Italy shopping spree and Maldives getaway in a private group chat. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about making sure they all got exactly what they deserved. That night, Madison texted me one last time before going quiet. One way or another, I'm getting what I deserve. I smiled at my phone. Yeah, I thought. You will, just not the way you think. See, the thing about people like Madison and my parents, they don't know when to quit. If you let them think they're wearing you down, they'll just keep talking. And the more they talk, the more ammo they give you. So I decided not to block them. I decided to invite the chaos in, just long enough to get everything I needed. The next morning, Madison called again. I could tell she'd been rehearsing her reasonable voice. Jacob, I want us to work this out. I'm not asking for all of it, just enough to cover tuition. Uh-huh. How much is enough? I asked, already knowing the number was going to be insane. She didn't disappoint. 50,000, but that's just the base. There's also books, housing, and personal wellness, I cut in. Silence. Then, how do you know about that? I'm psychic, I said. She huffed and changed the subject, but I could hear the panic in her voice. That told me she knew she'd already said too much somewhere, and she was wondering where I'd heard it. Meanwhile, my parents were running their own campaign. My mom tried the I'm just concerned angle. Madison is under a lot of stress, Jacob. You've always been the strong one. You can handle life without this money, but she can't. Be the bigger person. Translation. You're not the golden child, so your life is supposed to be harder. I knew I had to keep them talking, so I started asking questions. So, if I were to help, what would the money be used for exactly? I'd make it sound like I was considering it, then sit back and let them dig themselves deeper. They sent me spreadsheets. Actual spreadsheets. Madison had made a college budget file, complete with color coding. Tuition and books were maybe 20% of it. The rest? A $7,000 wardrobe refresh, $3,500 for networking events, red, parties, and $9,800 for transportation upgrade, which was code for a new car. I forwarded the file to myself from 3 different email accounts. I wasn't losing that gem. About a week into this, I got a text from a mutual friend. One of those people who likes to stay neutral, but also enjoys a little drama. She sent me screenshots from Madison's private Instagram, posts of her at high-end boutiques, selfies with captions like, manifesting my dream car, and no one can tell me I can't live the life I deserve. Gold. Pure gold. I started to see the bigger picture. Madison thought this was going to be a quick guilt trip and a payday. My parents thought they could pressure me like they always did when I was a kid. None of them realized they were handing me enough material to nuke their credibility in one shot. But timing was everything. You don't just dump all the ammo at once. You wait until they've gone so far that when you drop it, it's not just satisfying, it's irreversible. So I kept feeding them just enough hope to keep them talking. I mean, maybe I could help with part of it. I'll think about it. Let me see how much I can spare after my own expenses. Every time I said something like that, Madison's texts got friendlier. My mom started sending me thinking of you messages. My dad even asked about my job like he cared. It was fake, all of it, but it was perfect. Then Madison made her first big mistake. She sent me a picture of a luxury handbag she'd just bought, saying it was an investment piece for interviews. The tag was still on it, $1,200. And the kicker? She sent it while also texting me about how broke she was and how she didn't even have money for textbooks. I didn't respond. I just saved it. 2 days later, she made her second mistake. She posted on Instagram about a weekend trip she was taking with friends to relax before the semester starts. The location? A 5-star resort The caption? Self-care is essential to success. I didn't respond to that either. Saved it. By now I had screenshots of her shopping sprees, proof she blew her original college fund, the ridiculous college budget file, her parents, my parents in name only, openly backing her entitled nonsense in texts and voicemails. All I needed was one more thing, a clear sign they weren't going to stop unless they were publicly embarrassed. It came in the form of a group message. Madison added me, my parents, and about 6 other relatives into a chat titled Family Support. She opened with, I'm reaching out so everyone can hear how Jacob refuses to help his twin sister with her future, even though he's sitting on more than enough to change her life. My mom chimed in with, we're just asking for fairness. He's been blessed and should share. That was it, the perfect setup. They'd taken it public within the family. They'd drawn their line, and they had no idea that I'd been standing on the other side with a match and a gallon of gasoline. I decided then and there, when I lit this up, I wasn't just going to shut them down, I was going to make sure they couldn't spin it later. No misunderstandings. No, that's not what we meant. Just their words, their actions, and their entitlement in full display. And once it was out there, there'd be no coming back from it. They wanted to make it public? Fine. I was going to make it permanent. I took a deep breath, opened the family support group chat, and started typing like I was about to submit a final paper I knew was going to get an A. First message, okay, since we're talking openly in front of everyone now, let's make sure we all have the same information. Here's Madison's full college budget request. Then I attached the spreadsheet she'd sent me. You could practically hear the group chat pause for a collective double take. Next message, you'll notice that only 20% of this is actually for college. The rest is $7,000 for clothes, $9,800 for a transportation upgrade, and my personal favorite, $5,000 for personal wellness, which, judging by her receipts, means facials, yoga retreats, and maybe a subscription to some influencer's lifestyle course. Then I dropped the handbag picture with the $1,200 tag still on it. This was purchased yesterday. Not sure how this fits into struggling student territory, but hey, maybe it's a textbook holder. Silence in the chat for a second. Then my mom jumps in. That's not the point, Jacob. The point is that you've been blessed. I cut her off with the Instagram screenshots of Madison at the 5-star resort. And here's a little self-care trip from last weekend. Must be exhausting to balance college applications and poolside memos? Oh wait, I'm not supposed to mention the drinks, my bad. The chat starts blowing up. A couple of cousins leave the group immediately. One aunt sends the eyes emoji. My dad tries damage control. Jacob, this is unnecessary. We're family. So I went for the throat. I attached the proof from my mutual friend showing Madison bragging in a private group chat about how she'd already burned through her original college fund on Italy and the Maldives, along with her exact words, it's fine. I'll just get Jacob to pay for the rest. He owes me anyway. I captioned it. So just to confirm, I owe you, because our parents dumped me on Rick and Karen when I was 12, so they could keep the better-looking one? I want to make sure I understand the logic. At this point, the group chat wasn't just awkward, it was nuclear fallout. My phone was buzzing like it was trying to escape the table. Relatives were DMing me separately saying they had no idea, or always suspected something was off about Madison's stories. Madison finally replied in the group, "You're taking everything out of context. That wasn't what I meant." And I laughed out loud reading it. Out of context? She literally spelled it out in perfect context. So I hit them with the finisher. Here's the context. Madison, you're not getting a dime. Mom, Dad, you raised her to believe she's entitled to whatever she wants, and now you're shocked it's blowing up in your faces. You could have left me alone, but you came for me, and now you've got the whole family watching. This is the last time I respond to any of you. Goodbye. Then I left the group. It felt incredible, like walking away from a dumpster fire you didn't start, but sure as hell finished. But I wasn't done. I sent the same evidence, every screenshot, every file, every photo, to the other side of the family, the ones who hadn't been in the chat. I didn't want there to be any chance Madison or my parents could spin it into Jacob was being mean, or he's making it up. Nope. The receipts were bulletproof. Within 24 hours, Madison's GoFundMe had been deleted. Not because she'd reached her goal, because the comments were brutal. One relative even dropped the whole screenshot album in the comments, so anyone clicking the link got the full story before they could even read her pitch. People were posting links to the screenshots I'd shared, calling her a scammer. Someone even posted, "College fund?" More like vacation fund. Rick and Karen couldn't stop smiling for a week. Rick even made popcorn one night and said, This is better than Netflix. The best part? Madison hates losing face. She could have quietly taken the L and moved on. Instead, she doubled down and tried telling some relatives the pictures were old or edited. But the timestamps and metadata in the screenshots killed that lie instantly. Every time she tried to wiggle out of it, someone else sent me her excuse, and I'd send them the proof that she was lying again. Her reputation in the family tanked faster than a bad crypto coin. Invitations to parties? Gone. The proud parent posts my mom used to make about her? Vanished. Even her friends started unfollowing her online. And me? I didn't even have to lift a finger after that first blast. The mess just kept spreading on its own. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. For the first time, they had none over me. They couldn't guilt me, couldn't twist the story, couldn't hide what they'd been doing for years. I'd turned their little public shaming stunt into a career-ending PR disaster, and all I had to do was hand them their own words back. I thought that was the end of it. But I underestimated just how desperate entitled people can get when the gravy train gets derailed. Because a few months later, when their money troubles started catching up to them, my parents showed up at my door. Not to yell, not to guilt trip, to beg. And man, that was the sweetest moment of all. Picture it. Saturday afternoon, I'm in sweatpants, halfway through a plate of leftover lasagna, watching some guy on TikTok explaining how to redesign a 1-meter room with only galvanized steel. Life is peaceful. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not the casual kind, not neighbor borrowing sugar knock. This was sharp, rapid, desperate. I peek out the window and nearly drop my fork. Mom and Dad, on my porch. For a second, I thought maybe they were delivering an apology basket. You know, one of those overpriced arrangements with fancy cheeses and maybe a little card saying, "Sorry for being trash, parents." But nope, they were standing there in clothes that looked like they'd been slept in, with faces like someone had just repossessed their souls. I opened the door halfway, because I'm not stupid. Wow, the better child busy today. So you decided to slum it? Dad tries for a chuckle. Jacob, come on, that's not necessary. Oh, it's necessary. I told them. So, what brings you here? Forgot my birthday again and wanted to make up for the last 20 years? Mom jumps in, clasping her hands like she's auditioning for a church choir. We've made mistakes. We know that. But we're still family, and family should... Stop right there, I cut her off. Because the last time I heard the word family from you, it was followed by you asking for money. And judging by your faces, this isn't a social call. They exchange a look, the kind where you know they were hoping to warm me up before hitting me with the real reason they drove here. Finally, Dad says it. We're in a bit of a tight spot. I lean on the doorframe. A tight spot? Did Madison buy too many personal wellness packages? Mom sighs, like she's the one who's been wronged. The house is, well, it's in foreclosure. We've had some debts pile up, and your sister... Right on cue, Madison walks up from the driveway. Designer sunglasses on, holding a coffee cup the size of her head. Hey, Jacob, she says, like she's greeting a waiter she's about to stiff on a tip. I grin. Well, if it isn't the star of the GoFundMe scammer documentary. What's up, sis? She ignores that. We're just here to talk. Things have been hard and you have the means to help us. There it was. Not even dressed up this time. Just straight to give me your money. I tilt my head. You're right, Madison. I do have the means. And I'm using them for me. Crazy concept. I know. Dad steps forward like he's trying to reclaim some fatherly authority he never earned. We're asking for a loan. Interest-free. Just enough to get back on our feet. I laugh. You guys have been on your feet for years. They've just been stomping on everyone else's toes. And now that you've tripped, you're looking for me to be your crutch? Mom tries the guilt trip next. We took you in when you were a baby. Correction, I interrupt. You gave me away to Rick and Karen because I didn't match the holiday photo aesthetic. Let's not rewrite history. Madison scoffs. God, you're so dramatic. It's just money. You act like we're asking for your kidney. Yeah, I say. But see, the difference is if you took my kidney, you'd probably sell it and then still come back asking for the other one. Dad's jaw tightens. We're giving you a chance to be the bigger person here. I smirk. I've been the bigger person since I was 12. You guys were just too busy polishing Madison's halo to notice. They're all standing there now, shifting uncomfortably, realizing the old tactics aren't working. So Mom drops the fake humility and goes straight to desperation. If we lose the house, we'll have nowhere to go. Bummer, I say. But on the bright side, it's a lot easier to take family portraits when you don't have to worry about furniture blocking the shot. Madison tries one last time. Please, Jacob. Just enough to get back on our feet. I swear I'll pay you back. I lock eyes with her. Oh, like you were going to pay back your original college fund? Or like you were going to pay for your own trips instead of making a GoFundMe to scam relatives? Forgive me if your track record doesn't inspire confidence. There's a long pause. Nobody's smiling anymore. Madison looks like she's ready to spit nails. Dad's face is red. Mom's eyes are glossy, but not from sadness, from rage that I'm not folding. So I finish it. Calm, steady, no yelling. You all made your choice a long time ago. You picked your favorite. You backed her even when she was wrong. And you decided I was disposable. Now you're standing here because you need something from the disposable one. So here's my answer. The same one you gave me my whole life. No. And with that, I shut the door. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. No knocking, no shouting. Just the sound of footsteps back to the car and the engine starting. I went back to my lasagna, and let me tell you, it tasted amazing. Life after shutting that door on them was quiet. Quiet in the best way possible. No surprise knocks. No guilt trip voicemails. No random family group chats trying to stage an intervention for my conscience. Just me, Rick, Karen, my plans, and the inheritance exactly where it belonged, in my account. I didn't gloat out loud about it. Not because I was the bigger person, just because the satisfaction didn't need an audience. I knew. That was enough. Until the universe decided to give me an encore. It was a Friday night. I was out with 2 friends at a decent mid-range steakhouse. The kind of place where the menus don't have pictures and the waiters act like they invented the specials. We just finished demolishing a plate of appetizers when I got up to hit the bathroom. As I walked down the hall past the kitchen entrance, I caught a glimpse of a mop handle sticking out of a yellow bucket. And then I saw her. Madison. Hair tied back in a bun that had lost the fight hours ago. Blue janitor uniform, rubber gloves, mopping the tile floor with all the enthusiasm of someone scrubbing graffiti off a gas station wall. I froze. Then, without even trying to stop it, I started laughing. Out loud. The kind of laugh you can't fake because it comes from pure disbelief and joy colliding in your chest. She looked up and instantly went pale. "Oh my God," she muttered, trying to turn her face away. No, don't hide," I said, already pulling out my phone. "Blue really suits you. Honestly, this is a better look than the Maldives bikini shots." "Delete that," she snapped, pointing at my phone as I took the first picture. Click. She tried to step behind the mop bucket, but I sidestepped with her. "Come on, sis, just one for the family album. We can put it next to the one where you held up the need money, ask your real family sign." Click, click. Her jaw clenched. "Jacob, I swear to God." "You swear a lot of things," I cut in. "Like you'd pay back your college fund. Like you wouldn't waste money. Like you'd get what you deserved. Looks like you did." A couple of diners on their way to the bathroom slowed down, glancing at her, then at me. I gave them a little shrug and stage whispered, "We had a family reunion. She's in her work clothes." Madison's face flushed crimson. She muttered something I couldn't hear and practically sprinted through the swinging kitchen doors, abandoning the mop mid-hall. I stood there for a second, just grinning. Then I took one last picture of the lonely mop bucket and went back to my table like nothing had happened. Of course, I didn't just keep those pictures to myself. I sent them to my 2 closest cousins, the same ones who'd been in the family support chat when I dropped the receipts months ago. By the time I got home, one of them had already made a side-by-side meme. On the left, Madison posing in Italy with shopping bags. On the right, Madison in her blue janitor uniform, captioned, "Living the life she deserves." The next day, I woke up to a barrage of texts from her. "Delete those pictures now! You're obsessed with ruining me! I will sue you!" I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That's it. A few hours later, Mom called. I didn't answer. Then Dad called. Same result. Then they tried from a block number, which went straight to voicemail. That one I saved without listening. I didn't need to hear the script. I already knew it was some variation of "you've gone too far" mixed with "we're still family." What they didn't get was that this wasn't going too far. This was exactly as far as I wanted to go. This wasn't about revenge for every single thing they'd done. It was about letting them live in the reality they'd built, and occasionally walking by to enjoy the view. Madison had spent her whole life convinced she'd always be on top, that someone, me, my parents, the family, whoever, would swoop in to save her no matter how badly she screwed up. Seeing her in that uniform, mopping floors, and knowing there wasn't a rescue coming, that was better than any apology she could have faked. When I left the restaurant that night, I walked past the kitchen doors again. Madison was back at her post, head down, avoiding eye contact. I didn't stop. Didn't say a word. just let my laughter trail behind me like perfume. Because blue really does suit her. At dinner, my mom humiliated me for not owning a penthouse like my brother. They all laughed, until I revealed he's been renting it from me for years. The table fell silent, my mom froze, and my brother's smile disappeared instantly. Hey, Reddit! Growing up, my family treated my younger brother like he was made of gold, and treated me like background noise. I kept my head down, built my own life quietly, and figured that was the end of it. Turns out they weren't done dragging me into their nonsense. Before things got messy, here's how it all started. My name is Jason. At the time, I was 28 and working in real estate finance. Nothing flashy on the outside. A small apartment, a quiet life, the same old car. My family has always acted like I'm the background character. That started early and pretty much shaped everything. Growing up, the star of the house was my younger brother, Logan. If he walked into a room, the energy shifted like someone special just showed up. Didn't matter what he actually did. The confidence, the charm, the whole loud but likable thing. My parents ate it up like it was proof he was destined for great things. My mom, Monica, was the biggest supporter of the whole Logan is amazing belief system. She loved making everything into some kind of lesson. If I said I wanted to try a new hobby, she'd twist it into a talk about what a real man focuses on. If I didn't tell her my plans, she'd act like I was shutting her out. If I did tell her, she'd pick through every detail and then guilt-trip me the moment I pushed back. I learned pretty fast that nothing stayed simple with her. My dad, Frank, wasn't the loud type. He didn't pick sides outright, but he had this thing where he'd jump in with the worst possible comments at the worst possible moments. If Logan did something stupid and I reacted, Frank would go, "Well, let's look at it from Logan's side too," which never helped and always ended up with me looking dramatic. Even as kids, he did that. It was like he thought arguing both sides was some deep wisdom. The best example of our family dynamic happened when we were little. When we moved into a new house, there were 2 bedrooms upstairs. One was bigger with a big window and enough space for a whole setup. The other was just normal. I was older, so I figured the bigger one was mine. Nope. Monica said, "Logan is more energetic. He needs room to express himself." That was her word. Express. I got the smaller room because apparently being quiet meant I didn't need space. Birthdays were the same way. Logan wanted a new bike. He got the top model. I asked for running shoes once and got the cheapest pair on sale. If Logan brought home a drawing from school, Monica hung it on the fridge like he was some prodigy. If I got an A on a math test, she said, "Well, of course you did. You're the responsible one." There was always a way to flip my wins into something plain. Logan learned how to use all that pretty early. If he annoyed me and I told him to knock it off, he'd go straight into the classic lines. "Relax, it's not that serious," or "I'm just messing around." Or then he'd smile in that way that made the grown-ups say things like, "See, Jason? He's just being playful." I'd be the one told to lighten up. If we ever argued and I actually had a point, Logan would twist it until suddenly I was the one who misheard or didn't get the joke. That gaslighting stuff wasn't a word in our house, but he was basically fluent in it before hitting middle school. And he got rewarded for it because Monica loved his quick thinking, and Frank always defended him by saying, "Logan didn't mean it that way." After a while, I realized trying to correct anything just made it worse for me. The more I pushed back, the more I got labeled as uptight or too serious. The more Logan messed around, the more charming he looked. So I adjusted. I stayed quiet, kept my opinions to myself, and went along with whatever made the house peaceful. If Logan wanted the bigger room, take it. If he got praised for stuff he didn't even earn, fine. If I did well in something and no one cared, whatever. I stopped chasing approval because it was never coming. Not for me. By the time we hit high school, Logan was basically a golden retriever with perfect lighting. Teachers, family friends, cousins, they all loved him instantly. Meanwhile, I was the kid people forgot was in the room until they needed something heavy lifted or something fixed. I didn't hate him. That's the weird part. I just learned there wasn't space for me to be anything else. If Logan took up the whole stage, the only place left for me was the side hallway. So I chose the lane no one else cared about, working quietly, minding my business, doing things at my own pace. I figured if my family wasn't going to see me, then I'd build a life they couldn't argue with. But at that time, I didn't know how far that would go. Or that one day Logan would walk straight into something I built without even knowing it. Or that the same dynamic from childhood would turn into something way bigger than just bedroom sizes and fridge drawings. Back then, I was just the quiet older brother. And in their eyes, that's all I would ever be. College is where the difference between me and Logan really showed up. He got into this well-known university that my parents treated like it was proof he was a once-in-a-generation talent. Tuition? Covered. Housing? Covered. Spending money? Monica slipped him extra without even admitting it. The day he opened the acceptance email, she was crying and hugging him like he already changed the direction of the whole family. I didn't take that same route. I started at community college because it made sense and didn't wreck my bank account. I juggled 2 jobs at first, sometimes 3 when hours got cut. Morning shifts stocking shelves, late shifts doing deliveries, weekends tutoring whoever needed to pass basic algebra. I wasn't miserable about it, but it definitely wasn't the story Monica bragged about to relatives. She kept pushing into my business during this time. She'd show up unexpectedly, just to check on me, then use the visit to question every choice I made. If I was studying, she'd start giving speeches about how a real man doesn't hide behind books. If I didn't answer her calls right away, she'd leave guilt messages like, "I guess you don't need your mother anymore." When I called back, she'd slide into more advice I didn't ask for. Every conversation felt like a report she was filing. Meanwhile, Logan was coasting at his school, like it was a stage built for him. Nothing he did was actually impressive, but you wouldn't know that from how he acted. If he went to one networking event, he'd come home talking like he was leading a startup. If he passed a regular class, Monica treated it like an accomplishment that deserved a post on the family group chat. Logan took all that and ran with it, talking big about business ideas that never went anywhere. He'd say things like, "Some people are built to build empires," meaning himself, of course. When Logan graduated, Monica planned a celebration like he was royalty. She rented a whole event space, hired some local photographer, ordered decorations with his school colors, the whole package. People from every corner of the family tree showed up. Logan walked in wearing this confident smile that he knew everyone loved. Then they surprised him with this expensive new car, something shiny that immediately became the center of the evening. Every relative got a picture with him next to it, like they were posing with a celebrity. My graduation a year later looked nothing like that. I finished near the top of my class after transferring to a state school, and the family dinner for me was at a regular place with just my parents, Logan, and Aunt Denise. Monica handed me a card with a small gift card inside and said she didn't know what I needed. Logan joked about how I could finally upgrade my wardrobe, and Monica laughed like he was hilarious. It wasn't mean on purpose, but it still landed the same way. Aunt Denise made everything worse. She's the type who tries to pry information out of you like it's her hobby. She sat down next to me and immediately asked, "So, Jason, do you have anyone special yet?" Loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Then she followed with, "How much are you making now?" Like she had any right to know. I answered short and clean, but she kept pushing, saying she asked because she cared. Later, I heard from a cousin that she repeated everything to half the family, adding her own comments like, "Jason seems unsure of himself," or, "He's not moving as fast as Logan." She acted shocked when I confronted her, saying I was being too sensitive. That became the theme of everything. Anytime I pushed back or corrected something, even gently, the whole family defaulted to the same line. "Jason, don't be jealous." They said it automatically, as if the only reason I could possibly be frustrated was envy. Never mind the years of differences, the uneven treatment, or the fact that I was actually working harder than anyone realized. If Logan exaggerated something about his future, they called it ambition. If I pointed out something real, I was trying to steal the spotlight. After a while, I stopped explaining myself. Every time I spoke up, it turned into a lecture from Monica or a "let's consider both sides" speech from Frank. Logan would smirk and say he didn't mean anything by whatever he said, like always. It was easier to stay quiet and focus on what I was building for myself. By the end of college, Logan looked like the family's rising star. I looked like the dependable older brother who would figure things out eventually. And nobody had any clue how wrong they were. After college, I took the first job that made sense, an entry-level role at a small investment firm. The pay barely beat what I made juggling college jobs, but I didn't care. The company was small enough that I could learn fast. I sat in on meetings I shouldn't have been in, asked questions, handled real projects. It was stressful, messy, and exactly what I needed. I lived in a cheap studio that barely fit a bed and a desk. No elevator, thin walls, a kitchen the size of a closet. My car was the same old Honda from high school. The AC worked when it felt like it. I didn't go out much, didn't buy new clothes, didn't pretend to keep up. I just worked, studied, and saved. My routine was simple. Work during the day, study at night. I was grinding for my Series 7 and 66 licenses, spending nights buried in textbooks and practice tests. It wasn't glamorous, but it moved me forward. Monica didn't see it that way. Every call turned into a speech. Logan is living like a man, why aren't you? You're wasting your 20s hiding behind work. You need to take risks if you want to get ahead. She recycled the same lines so often they sounded rehearsed. If I told her I couldn't afford weekend trips or parties, she'd sigh like I disappointed her. Then she'd switch gears. Was I dating, networking, building connections? Every question carried judgment, like she'd already decided the answers. Logan, meanwhile, looked like he was thriving. He moved into a nice apartment despite not working full-time anywhere. His money came from friends, girlfriends, and projects that existed only on social media. He'd show up at family dinners dressed like a brand ambassador, talking about business ventures that never went anywhere. Monica ate it up. Logan just has that spark, she'd say. He knows how to put himself out there. Then there was Trevor, one of Logan's closest friends, the kind who made himself at home anywhere. He showed up at family dinners more often than some relatives, laughing loud, flattering Monica, and making Logan look even better. He always slipped in a joke at my expense. Jason, you still driving that old thing? Man, you work too much. When are you going to start living? He'd laugh it off, Monica would smile, and Frank would stay quiet like always. None of them saw what I was actually doing. After a couple of years, I switched firms twice, each move bringing better pay and more responsibility. I dove deeper into real estate finance, learning how deals were structured and where real money moved. I liked the challenge of numbers that built something tangible: properties, portfolios, futures. By 24, I was finally breathing. Not rich, but comfortable. I still lived small. Same car, same apartment, but my savings were stacking. Every extra dollar went toward investments. I wasn't chasing flash. I was building a foundation. Cousin Blake reappeared around then, suddenly interested in finance. He'd always gravitated to Logan because Logan made everything sound exciting. Blake was the kind who chased trends, bragged about the next big thing, and bailed before understanding any of it. When he found out about my job, he started poking. So, Jace, how much you pulling in now? Before I could answer, he'd add, Logan's killing it, man. You seen his socials? If I said I was focusing on long-term growth, he'd roll his eyes. You're overthinking. Logan just knows how to win. He made it sound like my quiet progress was failure, and Logan's empty showmanship was brilliance. It became a pattern. Anytime I tried explaining what I was building, someone twisted it into proof that I was too serious or jealous. So I stopped explaining. I let them believe whatever they wanted. I worked, studied, and kept my plans to myself. I watched Logan build his image. Expensive photos, borrowed luxury, praise he didn't earn. I built something else. Discipline, leverage, stability. I learned markets, built credit, built options. The difference was invisible from the outside, but real. Everyone around me was drawn to Logan's glow, but I knew better. Image doesn't pay the bills, and charm doesn't build equity. While they were clapping for him, I was quietly setting the stage for the moment everything would flip. So I stayed in my lane, stacking knowledge, money, and patience, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. Logan was busy performing success. I was busy creating it. And one day, when the time was right, that difference would finally matter. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the real estate market behaved strangely. High-end units that once sold instantly started lingering. Owners who used to brag about never negotiating began slashing prices. I watched it closely, not because I was ready to buy, but because I'd been saving for years and wanted to be prepared when the right deal appeared. That deal showed up in the form of a penthouse at Harrison Tower. The photos looked unreal. Floor-to-ceiling windows, wraparound terrace, open layout, sleek kitchen. The price was far lower than anything comparable, so low it looked like a listing error. Then I saw the seller's name, Adrian Holt, a tech executive who'd relocated across the country. A quick search showed he wanted to unload the place fast, not chase the perfect price. It made sense. Convenience over profit. I dug into the numbers. Even after renovation costs, the deal penciled out beautifully. Still, buying a $2+ million property isn't a casual decision. For weeks, I sat at my desk after work, running spreadsheets, checking taxes, renovation budgets, and rental yields. Some nights I thought I was crazy. Other nights it felt like the exact payoff I'd been building toward. I told no one. Not Monica, not Frank, and definitely not Logan. Monica would have lectured me about taking on too much. Frank would have tried to see both sides until I lost my patience. Logan would have twisted it into a competition. Silence was easier. In early 2021, I made the offer. Adrian accepted almost immediately, relieved to be free of it. I financed the purchase as an investment property. The bank approved it based on projected rent, and I brought a heavy down payment from years of disciplined saving. For privacy and liability, I took title through a small single-purpose LLC. Once the deal closed, I went straight into renovation mode. The bones of the place were solid, it just needed updating. I wanted timeless, not trendy, something high-end tenants wouldn't nitpick. Contractors, delays, supply shortages. It was months of chaos, but the space slowly became something exceptional. While construction continued, I hired a property management company to handle everything: screening, maintenance, accounting. I preferred a clean separation between my life and my investments. Tenants would see the LLC and the management firm, never my personal name. The lease even included a monthly housekeeping and inspection clause with written notice and a short photo report afterward. Luxury renters liked that kind of structure. It kept standards high. When the penthouse was ready, we listed it as a luxury rental. Applications flooded in. Professionals, newly wealthy couples, executives, everyone wanted that address. I scrolled through the names casually until one stopped me cold. Logan Mitchell. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but the phone number and email confirmed it. My younger brother was applying to rent my property without realizing I owned it. His paperwork looked impressive. Clean statements, strong balance, steady deposits. But I knew him too well. Logan never held a stable job. He lived on charm and borrowed shine. A little digging explained the mystery. His new girlfriend, Vanessa, came from money and had a well-paid job. The income on the statements was her money. Transfers dressed up as earnings. Vanessa's online presence screamed status. Designer restaurants, flawless selfies, luxury hashtags. She loved a man who could match her image, or at least fake it. The Harrison Tower penthouse fit her story perfectly. I could almost hear her telling Logan, "You deserve a place that reflects who you are." And he, of course, believed her. For a day, I debated rejecting the application. It would have been easy. No explanation needed. But the situation was too surreal to walk away from. Logan had always been the family star, the one everyone said was going places. And here he was, unknowingly trying to rent what I'd built in silence. I wasn't planning revenge or a trap. I just wanted to see what happened when our roles quietly reversed. So I approved it. The management firm handled the lease and move-in. Logan saw only the LLC on the documents and the property manager emails. A week later, he and Vanessa moved in, posting photos like they'd reached a new level of success. Sunset shots from the terrace, drinks held just right for the camera. I watched from a distance, half amused, half uneasy. Part of me expected disaster. Part of me felt vindicated. He was living inside something I created, financed, and designed. The same family that once treated my achievements like background noise now praised Logan for finally making it. And he still had no idea he was standing on the foundation I built. Once Logan moved into the penthouse, he treated it like his personal victory lap. He didn't ease into it either. Right away, he started calling it my place in every conversation. Family calls, group chats, social media posts, anywhere he could get an audience. He never said he owned it, but he talked like he'd earned it through some massive achievement no one else understood. People believed him because he said everything with confidence. Monica loved every second of it. She went right back into her moralizer mode. Anytime I said anything about my work or my apartment, she'd slip in comments like, "Logan is really living. You should think about pushing yourself more." Or, "You're getting older, Jason. Your brother is moving forward. You don't want to stay stuck forever." She used the penthouse as proof that Logan was ahead in life, even though it was Vanessa's money covering it. To Monica, appearances mattered more than facts. If Logan looked successful, that was enough for her. Meanwhile, I got monthly reports from Nadia, the property manager. Once a month after the scheduled housekeeping visit, Nadia's team sent a short photo report. Clean kitchen, tidy living room, minimal wear. Sometimes there were little signs of Logan's lifestyle. Sunglasses left on the couch, designer shoes by the door, bottles of expensive skincare on the bathroom counter. Nothing destructive, just loud. He decorated the place like someone who thought taste meant picking the most expensive item on a website. Logan hosted game nights, parties, dinner dates. He'd post pictures with captions like, "Another night with the best city view," or "Working hard, enjoying life." That view became part of his identity. If someone complimented the sunset, he acted like he personally arranged it. The first 2 years went smoothly rent-wise. Vanessa paid everything on time. She liked the image of being the girlfriend of a guy who lived in a penthouse. She dressed up for the elevator selfies, held her drinks in perfect lighting, arranged flowers on the counter for aesthetic photos. She pushed Logan to lean into the luxurious lifestyle even more. She'd tell him things like, "This place matches you," or People like us should live like this. The whole thing looked staged, but it worked for them. Then Vanessa got bored. She ended the relationship pretty fast. No big fight, no dramatic story. She simply lost interest once the shine wore off. The moment the status boost felt routine, she moved on. That was her thing. Ride the high, leave when it dips. Opportunist to the core. That's when the real problems started. Rent didn't come in on time. Nadia reached out to Logan, and he always had different excuses. A bank delay, a mix-up, a temporary issue he'd fix next week. I'd get updates from her, but I didn't say anything to him. I wasn't supposed to step in anyway. The management company handled tenants, so things stayed professional. Around the same time, Logan started dating Tara. She had a loud personality, strong opinions, and a talent for making small issues huge. She was a drama addict, the kind who stirred things up and then acted shocked when things blew up. She hyped Logan nonstop. If he complained about something, she'd jump in with, "They don't appreciate you," or "You're meant for bigger things." And where she also posted vague comments online that were obviously aimed at people in our family. Stuff like, "Some folks can't handle another person's rise," or "Jealousy is loud." Logan pretended he didn't know what she meant, but he always reposted her stories with emojis. Logan's rent kept slipping. 1 month late turned into 2. Then there'd be a partial payment. Then nothing. Nadia stayed patient, but she made it clear this wasn't sustainable. Despite that, Logan talked like he was thriving. He even started giving real estate advice to the family. At dinners or gatherings, he'd say stuff like, "Property is all about timing. You need to know when to jump." Or, "Renting in certain areas is smarter than buying." I could explain, but it's complicated. If anyone asked him specifics, he'd dodge it with "trust me" energy. Monica swallowed every word. Frank would nod and play neutral, even when I pulled him aside later to say Logan didn't know what he was talking about. Frank would respond with his usual lines. "Well, maybe he has a point," or "We shouldn't dismiss him." The worst moment came when Logan and Tara showed up to a family lunch talking about buying the penthouse. Logan said it like he'd already been planning it for months. I sat there listening to my younger brother casually talk about undercutting me, his own landlord, without knowing it. Tara nodded along like she'd already picked paint colors. Monica was thrilled, acting like Logan was becoming a property expert. As my birthday week approached, I could feel something building. The way the family talked, the way Logan acted, the way Monica compared us. It all felt like I was stuck in the same childhood dynamic again. Only this time, I wasn't a kid anymore. And I wasn't going to stay quiet. My parents picked the restaurant for my birthday, an upscale place they'd been wanting to try for a while. White tablecloths, quiet background music, servers who glide instead of walk. The kind of place where everyone sits a little straighter. I arrived on time. Monica and Frank were already seated, Monica looking excited in a way she usually reserved for Logan. Frank gave me a nod that felt like a placeholder for a real greeting. Logan showed up 20 minutes late, as expected. He walked in like he owned the building. Tara trailed behind him, smiling in that way she always did when she knew attention was on them. Logan didn't even apologize for being late. He just slid into his chair, clapped his hands together once, and said, "Man, sorry. Traffic near my place was insane." "My place?" He said it loud, like he wanted the whole table to hear. Monica lit up immediately. "Your city view must be gorgeous tonight," she said. "I bet everyone wishes they lived like you, Logan." Then she glanced at me the way she always did. Quick, sharp, judgmental. I hadn't even ordered water yet. Logan jumped straight into a story about hosting some big game night the night before. According to him, everyone there was amazed by the penthouse and kept telling him he had future CEO energy. He exaggerated every detail, acting like the terrace was something he personally designed. Tara nodded and added her own comments. "People don't get it," she said. "Living in a place like that changes your mindset. It attracts success. Logan's energy is different now." She said it with that drama addict tone. Soft, sharp, meant to stir something. Then she glanced at me like she was checking if I'd react. I didn't. Logan kept talking. "Yeah, I've been thinking about redoing the guest room," he said. "I want something more modern. Something that matches the vibe." Monica jumped in again. "You should. That's what successful men do. They improve their space, make it reflect their level." Then, turning directly to me, "Jason, you could learn from that. You're older, and you're still in that tiny apartment. It's time to grow up. Your brother is showing you what real progress looks like." She said it bluntly, not even hiding it. It wasn't a slip. It was a hit meant to land. Frank stayed quiet, which honestly made it worse. Tara smiled like she enjoyed the tension. Logan leaned back in his seat, proud of the whole scene. I took a sip of water to steady myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't embarrassed. I was just done. Logan moved on to talking about how he and Tara might upgrade some things soon. The owner doesn't even keep up with the place, he said, waving his hand. It's just some investor guy. I'm sure he's not even paying attention to anything. I set my glass down. I've seen it, I said. Logan paused mid-sentence. Seen what? The penthouse, I said. I get the once-a-month housekeeping and inspection reports with photos. The ones you signed off on in your lease. Silence hit the table instantly. No music, no nearby chatter, just stillness. Monica frowned. What are you talking about, Jason? I looked at Logan. I'm saying I see the penthouse because I'm the owner. I get the landlord reports. Logan stared at me like he didn't understand the words. Tara's eyebrows lifted. Frank looked confused, then concerned. I kept it simple. You don't own the place, Logan. You rent it, from me. Tara froze. Monica blinked like she'd been slapped. Frank's mouth opened, then closed again. Logan finally spoke. No. You're joking. I pulled out my phone and opened the property management app. I turned the screen toward him. Leaseholder. Logan Mitchell. Unit. Harrison Tower. Penthouse level. Current balance. Several months overdue. You want to see the payment history? Logan stared at the screen. His face went pale instantly. Monica leaned in, voice sharp. Jason, why would you hide something like this? Why didn't you tell us? This is humiliating. Then she turned it into guilt, the way she always did. You made us believe he earned this. You let us brag about him. You embarrassed us. Frank jumped in with his usual wrong-timed logic. Maybe Logan thought he'd catch up on payments. Maybe he didn't want to worry anyone. Logan shook his head. I didn't know it was yours. How was I supposed to know that? You couldn't have, I said. The paperwork lists the holding company and the management firm. He looked around like the room was shifting. Then he added the classic line, almost automatic. You're taking this too seriously, Jason. I was going to pay. 3 months late? I asked. And planning to buy the place from a mystery owner you thought was clueless? Logan's voice cracked. I wasn't trying to... He stopped talking. The gaslighting routine didn't fit because there was nothing to twist. The facts were right there on the screen. He lowered his head, shoulders tight. No comeback, no charm. I exhaled once. Here's what's going to happen. You've got 30 days to either pay what you owe or move out. No negotiation on the deadline, no excuses, and you stop implying online that you own the place. Be clear you're renting. You want respect? Start with the truth. Monica looked like she wanted to argue again, but Frank put a hand on her arm. For once, she stayed silent. Tara didn't say a word. She looked at Logan like she suddenly realized how fragile his image was. The server came by with a check, saw the tension, and quietly set it down. Nobody moved for a minute. The whole table felt heavier than the air should allow. Dinner ended without dessert, without small talk, without the usual fake cheer. When we walked out, nobody said anything. Logan didn't look at me. Monica tried to control her breathing. Frank walked slowly, hands in his pockets. For the first time in years, the room wasn't centered around Logan. And for the first time, no one could pretend anymore. The week after the dinner felt like the house was split into separate weather systems. Monica called nonstop. Every call came with a guilt punch, followed by a lecture. Jason, you humiliated your brother. You hid this from us on purpose. You need to be the bigger man. She kept poking into my decisions like she had the authority to audit my entire adult life. If I didn't answer, she left long voicemails about how I'd broken the family atmosphere. Frank stayed quieter, but he didn't help much. He'd slip in the usual devil's advocate lines during the few calls we had. Maybe Logan didn't want to worry you. Maybe he thought he'd pay it back once things stabilized. It made no sense, but he said it calmly, as if trying to soften everything. Logan sent paragraphs of texts that flipped back and forth. One message would be an apology about lying and falling behind. The next would say things like, "You made me look stupid," or "You didn't have to expose me like that." It was classic gaslighting, half owning it, half shifting blame. Aunt Denise called, pretending she wanted to check on me, but immediately asked, "So what really happened at dinner?" She pushed for details, then spread an exaggerated version to the rest of the family before I even hung up. I heard from a cousin an hour later that she had already told everyone there was a scene. Cousin Blake reached out too, repeating Logan's version like it was fact. According to him, I had blown things out of proportion and should have handled it privately. He didn't mention Logan's overdue rent once. A few days later, Logan called trying to bargain. "Look, it's basically my home," he said. "I've lived there long enough that it counts." Then he added, Family should help family, man. Why are you making this so strict? Trevor jumped in at some point, calling me to talk things out. He pushed boundaries the way he always did. You're coming off cold, Jace. Your brother needs support. He talked like he had a seat at the table, even though he'd barely contributed anything helpful in his entire life. Tara fueled everything, telling Logan everyone was jealous of him and targeting his rise. She made passive comments online that were clearly about me, like, people hate seeing others elevate. Logan reposted one of them before thinking better of it and deleting it. None of it changed anything. I stayed firm. Family dinners became tense. Some relatives took Logan's side because of what they'd heard first. Others stayed quiet because they didn't want to get involved. Conversations were sharp. Monica tried to deliver more of her moral speeches. You should guide your brother, not kick him down. This isn't what successful men do. She aimed every sentence at me. This time, I finally shut it down. Not loud, not aggressive, just clear. Mom, this isn't negotiable. Stop trying to make this my fault. She didn't like hearing it, but she backed off for the moment. Did I feel guilty? Yeah, a little. Not for exposing the truth, but because no matter how you slice it, watching your brother fall apart isn't fun. Still, I wasn't bending. Someone had to end the pattern. About 2 weeks after the dinner, Logan realized arguing wouldn't change anything. He told Nadia he'd start packing. When she updated me, she said he was trying to act casual, saying things like, I've been thinking of moving anyway, as if it was his choice. Tara disappeared from the picture halfway through the packing process. She pulled the classic drama addict move, stayed during the loud part, vanished when the dust settled. Nadia reported the unit was left in decent shape. Not perfect, but not trashed. Logan dropped off the keys through her, not me. Once he moved out on time and left the unit in good shape, I waived the back rent. It was my choice, not a concession. Logan still insisted he would pay me back eventually. I didn't argue. If he ever did, fine. If he didn't, the chapter was closed anyway. Logan moved into a smaller apartment he could actually afford. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. For a while, he went quiet online. No photos, no bragging, no posts about views or Sunday morning routines. I think the embarrassment hit hard, but in a way that forced him to reset. He found a real job doing basic marketing work. It wasn't impressive on the surface, but it was stable. He started showing up to it consistently, something he hadn't done with any responsibility before. Over time, he stopped performing success and started building it. We had a few blunt brother talks. Not emotional speeches, just simple, straight conversations where we told the truth without dodging. That's how things started fixing themselves. Slowly, quietly, honestly. Monica slipped into comparisons a couple times, usually during phone calls. Logan is finding his path, you know? Maybe you could guide him again. I shut it down respectfully each time. She eventually learned not to push that button. Frank changed too. He started asking me real questions about my work and investments. When he realized I'd bought and managed the penthouse myself, he treated me differently. More respect, less commentary. Half a year after everything happened, Logan was noticeably more grounded. He looked less tense, talked less about image, and didn't need someone else's money to feel valuable. He wasn't perfect, but he was real for the first time in years. The rest of the family improved too. Gatherings felt less like a Logan spotlight show and more equal. Nobody talked down to me. Nobody compared us out loud. Things felt balanced in a way I'd never seen growing up. I sold the penthouse for a strong profit and reinvested into a bigger project. I finally upgraded my own life a little, got a nicer apartment, a better car, and actually took time to enjoy the things I'd earned. I never saw any of this as revenge. It wasn't about making Logan pay. It was about the truth finally landing where it needed to. Sometimes a family doesn't change until the lie collapses. And once ours did, everything became clearer. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Mom called me trash at Christmas, all because I became more successful than my golden brother and expected me to just laugh. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just packed my bags in complete silence. Dad said, "You're overreacting." My mom said, "Goodbye." I said nothing. Some things don't need words. They need action. Now they're begging. Hey, Reddit. So my mom called me trash at Christmas dinner in front of 18 family members. Not in a joking way. Not in a playful roast way. She looked me dead in the eyes and called me the family disappointment, the trash who got lucky, while my golden child brother sat there smirking like he just won a prize. She expected me to laugh it off like I always did. Take the hit. Smile through it. Keep the peace. But something snapped in me that night, and for the first time in 31 years, I chose myself. Let me back up a bit because this story needs context. I'm Nathan, 31 years old, and I'm the oldest of two sons. My younger brother Brandon is 28, and from the moment he was born, that kid became the center of my parents' entire universe. I'm not being dramatic here. This isn't some sibling rivalry nonsense where I'm bitter because he got a bigger piece of cake at a birthday party once. This is decades of systematic favoritism that would make a documentary filmmaker weep. Growing up in our house in Ohio was like living in two different realities. There was Brandon's reality, where he was praised for breathing, celebrated for existing, and coddled through every single failure like he was some fragile piece of art. Then there was my reality, where nothing I did was ever good enough, every achievement was minimized, and I was basically treated like the family utility player who existed to make Brandon look better. When I was 16, I worked part-time at a grocery store to save money for a used car. Took me 18 months of stocking shelves and dealing with entitled customers to save up $3,000. My parents contributed exactly zero. They said it would build character. You know what they did when Brandon turned 16? They bought him a brand new Mustang. Cash. No questions asked. When I pointed out the obvious unfairness, my mom literally said the words that still ring in my ears today. She said Brandon was different. Brandon needed more support. Brandon was special. Special. That word haunted me through my entire childhood. Every time I accomplished something, it was expected. Every time Brandon accomplished anything, it was a miracle worth celebrating. I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA while working 25 hours a week. Brandon barely graduated with a 2.1 after being tutored by 3 different teachers my parents paid for privately. Guess who got the graduation party with 50 guests and catered food? Hint, it wasn't me. I got myself through college on scholarships and work-study programs. I studied finance because I was good with numbers, and I wanted stability, something my family never gave me. I graduated with honors in 4 years, while working nearly full-time. Brandon dropped out after 3 semesters because college wasn't for him. My parents paid off his $28,000 in student loans anyway. They said he needed a fresh start. Meanwhile, I'm over here drowning in student debt because apparently I was supposed to figure everything out on my own. Character building and all that. When I asked my parents if they could help with even a portion of my loans the same way they helped Brandon, my mom actually laughed. She said I was perfectly capable of handling it on my own. She said Brandon needed more help because life was harder for him. Harder. For the kid who never worked a job, never struggled academically without paid tutors, and never had to worry about whether he could afford textbooks. The double standard was so blatant it would be funny if it wasn't my actual life. I remember one Thanksgiving during my junior year when I came home stressed about finals and my part-time job schedule. I mentioned that I was working extra shifts to cover rent, and my mom looked at me like I had said something offensive. She told me I should focus more on family and less on money. This was the same woman who had just written Brandon a check for $2,000 because he wanted to take a road trip with his friends. The same woman who never once asked me how I was managing financially or if I needed anything. After college, I moved to Arizona for a job opportunity. Entry-level analyst position at an investment firm. Nothing glamorous. Definitely not impressive to my family who thought I was wasting my potential by not staying close to home like Brandon did. For years, I grinded. I'm talking 12-hour days, weekend work, constantly proving myself. I climbed the ladder the hard way because nobody handed me anything. Ever. Brandon bounced around through a series of jobs during this time. Retail, restaurant work, a brief stint as a personal trainer that lasted maybe 4 months. My parents subsidized his rent every single month. They bought his groceries. They co-signed his apartment when his credit was too garbage for him to qualify a loan. They even bought him a new car when the Mustang finally gave out after years of neglect. But here's where things started to shift. By 29, I had worked my way up to senior portfolio manager. I was handling accounts worth millions. I was making more money than both my parents combined. And suddenly, the family dynamic started getting weird. My mom would make these little comments whenever I visited. Things like asking if I really needed such a nice apartment, or questioning whether my job was stable enough, or suggesting that maybe I was working too hard and should slow down like Brandon, who had found peace in simplicity. Peace in simplicity. That's what she called her grown son living off their retirement savings while delivering food part-time and playing video games 16 hours a day. Brandon never said anything directly, but I could feel the resentment radiating off him every time I came home. The way he'd go quiet when I talked about work. The eye rolls when I mentioned anything about my life in Arizona. The comments about how some people just get lucky, while others have to struggle. Coming from the guy who had everything handed to him his entire life. The audacity was almost impressive. I tried to keep the peace for years. I really did. I sent money home when my parents complained about expenses. I bought Brandon birthday gifts he never acknowledged. I flew home for every major holiday, even though it meant using vacation days I could have spent actually relaxing. I did everything a good son and brother was supposed to do. And none of it mattered, because in their eyes, I would always be the difficult one who left, the cold one who chose career over family, the one who needed to be knocked down a few pegs. Which brings us to last Christmas. The Christmas that changed everything. My company had just closed a major deal that I led. We're talking the biggest acquisition in the firm's history. My bonus alone was more than my dad made in 2 years. I wasn't going to brag about it because that's not who I am. But I was proud. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had actually made it. Like all those years of sacrifice and grinding had finally paid off. I flew home for Christmas with actual hope in my heart. Stupid, I know. But I thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally acknowledge that their oldest son had built something real. My parents had invited the whole extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. 18 people crammed into their modest house for Christmas dinner. The house was decorated like a holiday catalog, and my mom had been cooking for 3 days straight. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Brandon was there, of course, holding court in the living room like he always did. He had a new girlfriend named Ashley who seemed nice enough. She was a dental hygienist who clearly had no idea what she was getting into with my family. Brandon was telling some story about his new job opportunity that turned out to be an MLM he had just joined. My parents were nodding along like he had just announced he cured cancer. When I walked in, the reception was lukewarm at best. A few quick hugs, some obligatory questions about my flight. Then everyone went back to focusing on Brandon and Ashley and the amazing business opportunity that was definitely not a pyramid scheme. I found myself standing alone by the appetizer table within 10 minutes of arriving. Classic. Dinner started around 6. My mom had outdone herself with the spread. Turkey, ham, all the sides, multiple desserts. We all squeezed around the extended dining table that barely fit in the room. I ended up wedged between my Aunt Carol and my cousin's husband, who I had met maybe twice. The seating arrangement felt intentional. Brandon was positioned at the center of the table, right between my parents, like a throne had been reserved for him. Ashley sat next to him looking impressed by everything, probably because she didn't know any better yet. The conversation flowed the way it always did at these things. Catching up, asking about kids, complaining about weather and politics and gas prices. Brandon dominated most of the discussion, talking about his new business venture like he was already a millionaire. My dad kept nodding enthusiastically, throwing in comments about how Brandon had finally found his calling. My mom beamed at him like he was announcing a Nobel Prize rather than an obvious pyramid scheme. Nobody asked me much of anything. Par for the course. I mostly listened and ate, which was fine. I had stopped expecting attention at family gatherings years ago. You learn to make yourself small when you grow up being treated as an afterthought. Then my grandmother, bless her heart, decided to bring me into the conversation. She asked how work was going. Simple question, innocent enough. I gave a modest answer about how things were going well, how we had a good year, how I was grateful for the opportunities I had. I wasn't bragging. I wasn't showing off. I was just answering a direct question from my 82-year-old grandmother, who genuinely wanted to know about my life. That's when my mom decided to interject. She laughed this cold, performative laugh and said something that made the entire table go silent. She said it was funny how the family trash ended up pretending to be successful. She said I must have fooled a lot of people to get where I was, because it certainly wasn't talent or hard work. She said Brandon was the one with real potential, and I just got lucky because I was willing to abandon my family for money. 18 people. 18 people heard my mother call me trash, call me a fraud, dismiss everything I had accomplished as luck and deception. My grandmother looked mortified. A few of my cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My dad stared at his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the world. And Brandon? Brandon smirked. That little smirk that said he had won. That said no matter what I accomplished, I would always be beneath him in our mother's eyes. For a moment, I felt that familiar urge to smooth things over, to laugh it off, to make a self-deprecating joke that would diffuse the tension and let everyone pretend nothing happened. That's what I had done my entire life. Take the hit, keep the peace, protect everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the years of accumulated disrespect. Maybe it was the fact that I had just accomplished something genuinely significant, and it still wasn't enough. Maybe it was seeing that smirk on Brandon's face one too many times. Whatever it was, something in me went cold. Not angry, not sad, just cold. Like a switch flipped and suddenly I could see everything clearly for the first time. I didn't say anything. I just set down my fork, stood up from the table, and walked upstairs to the guest room where my bag was. I could hear the confused murmurs starting below me. My mom calling out, asking where I was going, her voice already shifting to that defensive tone she used when she knew she had crossed a line but wasn't willing to admit it. I packed my bag methodically. Clothes, toiletries, the book I had brought for the flight, chargers. Everything went back into the suitcase with calm, deliberate movements. No rushing, no dramatic gestures, just a man collecting his belongings. By the time I came back downstairs with my bag, half the table had gotten up. My dad intercepted me in the hallway, his face a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. He told me I was overreacting. He said my mom didn't mean it like that. He said I was being dramatic and ruining Christmas for everyone. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had watched his wife tear me down for 31 years and never once intervened. This man who had funded my brother's failures while letting me struggle alone. This man who was now telling me that my reaction to being publicly humiliated was the problem. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just walked past him toward the front door. My mom was waiting there, her arms crossed, her expression a bizarre combination of indignation and something that might have been fear. She said that if I walked out that door, I was making a choice. She said I was showing everyone exactly who I really was. She said goodbye like it was a threat, like she expected me to crumble at the possibility of losing her approval. I stopped at the door. I looked at her. I looked at Brandon standing behind her with that permanent smirk. I looked at my dad who was already shaking his head like I was the disappointment. I looked at the family members gathered in the living room, watching this unfold like it was reality television. And I said nothing. Because some things don't need words. They need action. I opened the door, walked out, got in my rental car, and drove to the airport. I changed my flight to the next available departure. And by 11 p.m. on Christmas night, I was 30,000 feet in the air, heading back to Arizona. My phone was blowing up the entire time. Texts from my mom ranging from anger to guilt-tripping to fake concern. Messages from my dad telling me to stop being childish. A single text from Brandon that just said, "Nice tantrum, bro." I read every single one. Then I turned my phone off and ordered a ginger ale from the flight attendant. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The weeks after Christmas were interesting. I went back to work. I focused on my job. I hit the gym harder than I had in years. I reconnected with friends I had been neglecting. I did all the things that people say you're supposed to do when you're working through something difficult. But I didn't reach out to my family. Not once. My mom's messages evolved over those first few weeks. The initial anger gave way to guilt trips. The guilt trips gave way to passive-aggressive comments about how she hoped I was happy destroying the family. Then those gave way to silence for about a week. Then the silence gave way to tentative olive branches that weren't really olive branches at all. Messages asking if I was okay, but carrying the subtext that I should apologize for overreacting. My dad texted me exactly twice. Once to tell me that my mom was really upset and I should call her. Once to say that he hoped I knew what I was doing by cutting off my family. Both messages made it clear that he saw me as the problem, that my reaction to being publicly humiliated was somehow worse than the humiliation itself. Brandon didn't reach out at all after that initial text, which honestly tracked. Why would he? His position in the family hierarchy remained secure. If anything, my absence probably made him feel more validated. I didn't respond to any of them, not because I was being petty or playing games, but because I genuinely had nothing to say. What was there to discuss? My mother called me trash in front of 18 people and expected me to laugh. My father told me I was overreacting. My brother smirked like he had won some competition I didn't even know we were playing. These weren't people who misunderstood me. These were people who understood exactly who I was and chose to diminish me anyway. The silence stretched into January, then February. By March, I had gone 3 months without speaking to any member of my immediate family. It was the longest I had ever gone, and honestly, it was the most peaceful I had felt in years. I spent those months rediscovering who I was outside of my family's shadow. Turns out, I actually liked myself when I wasn't constantly being compared to Brandon, or made to feel like an outsider in my own family. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned years ago, started reading for pleasure again, took up hiking because Arizona has some incredible trails, and I finally had the mental energy to enjoy them. I even started cooking more, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for, when every ounce of my energy was going toward work and managing family stress. The peace was transformative. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped having that constant knot in my stomach that I had carried around for so long I forgot what it felt like to not have it. I realized how much of my life had been spent in survival mode, always bracing for the next criticism, the next comparison, the next reminder that I would never measure up no matter what I accomplished. My extended family started reaching out around February. My grandmother called to check on me, and I actually answered because she had never been part of the problem. She told me she was proud of me, that she understood why I left, and that she had given my mother an earful after I walked out. Apparently, half the family thought my mom had crossed a line. The other half thought I should just get over it. Family dynamics are fun like that. My Aunt Carol, the one I had sat next to at dinner, sent me a long email apologizing for not saying anything in the moment. She said she was so shocked by what my mother said that she froze. She said she had always seen how differently I was treated and regretted never speaking up. It meant something to hear that, to know that at least some people had noticed. But the people who actually needed to reach out, my mom, my dad, Brandon, radio silence that actually meant something. Not the silence of reflection or remorse. The silence of waiting for me to blink first. Waiting for me to cave and come crawling back like I always had before. Work continued to go well. Actually, it went better than well. Without the emotional drain of managing my family's dysfunction, I had more energy to focus, more clarity, more drive. I got promoted again in April to vice president of our regional division. I was 31 years old running a team of 40 people, managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions. I bought a house in May. Nothing crazy, but nice. 3 bedrooms, a pool, in a good neighborhood with actual community. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a 2-year-old German Shepherd mix named Duke, who became my best friend almost overnight. I started dating someone I met through a mutual friend. Her name was Rebecca, and she was an architect who had no patience for family drama because she had cut off her own toxic parents years ago. We understood each other in ways that felt rare. Life, for lack of a better word, was good. Actually good. Not the performative good I used to present to family members who didn't care anyway. Genuinely, authentically good. And then June happened. I found out through my grandmother that Brandon's MLM had imploded. Shocking, I know. Turned out the business opportunity was actually a predatory scheme that collapsed when federal regulators got involved. Brandon had not only lost all the money he invested, but had also convinced several family friends to join, resulting in multiple people threatening legal action against him. But that wasn't the best part. Brandon had apparently been living way beyond his means for months, expecting the MLM money to eventually start flowing. Credit cards maxed out, rent unpaid, loans taken out against basically anything he could leverage. When everything collapsed, he was left with nothing. Less than nothing. He was in debt to the tune of about $60,000, with no real job prospects and a reputation in our hometown as the guy who scammed people into a pyramid scheme. My parents, who had been funding his lifestyle for years, were suddenly faced with a choice: bail him out again and drain what was left of their retirement savings, or let him face the consequences of his own decisions for the first time in his life. They tried to bail him out. Of course they did. But the hole was too deep this time. They paid off some of the more threatening creditors, covered his rent for a few months, and then hit a wall. My dad was forced to come out of retirement and take a part-time job at a hardware store. My mom started doing bookkeeping work from home for local businesses. At their ages, they were grinding just to keep Brandon afloat. Meanwhile, Brandon moved back into their house because he couldn't afford to live on his own. The golden child, nearly 30 years old, was back in his childhood bedroom with his parents working to support his failures. I heard all of this secondhand. From my grandmother, from Aunt Carol, from the family grapevine that somehow kept me in the loop even though I hadn't spoken to my parents in 6 months. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction hearing about Brandon's downfall. I'm human. After 3 decades of watching him fail upward while I clawed for every inch, there was a certain poetic justice to seeing reality finally catch up with him. But I also didn't feel the need to gloat. I didn't reach out to say I told you so. I didn't insert myself into their crisis. I just continued living my life, building my career, spending time with Rebecca and Duke, enjoying the peace I had fought so hard to find. Then the messages started. My mom reached out first, not with an apology, not with any acknowledgement of what she had said at Christmas, but with a request. She wanted to know if I could help them out financially, just temporarily, just until they got back on their feet. She said family helps family. She said she knew things had been difficult between us, but surely I wouldn't abandon them when they needed me most. The audacity was almost impressive. This woman had called me trash 6 months ago, had never apologized, had never acknowledged that she did anything wrong. And now she was asking me for money because her golden child's failures had finally caught up with everyone. I didn't respond. A week later, my dad reached out with essentially the same request, wrapped in slightly different language. He talked about how hard things had been, how they never expected to be in this situation, how family was supposed to stick together through thick and thin. He mentioned my success several times, emphasizing how proud they were of what I had accomplished. Funny how that pride only showed up when they needed something from me. I didn't respond to that either. Then Brandon reached out. That one actually surprised me. His message was shorter than our parents' attempts. Less pleading, more entitled. He said he knew we had our differences, but that I was still his brother. He said he was going through a rough patch and could use some support. He said he would pay me back once he got back on his feet. He even threw in a comment about how I had always been the smart one, and he was just trying to learn from my success. I read that message 3 times, looking for any hint of genuine remorse, any acknowledgement of the years of mistreatment, any sign that he understood why I had walked away. There was nothing. Just a golden child expecting the universe to provide for him once again, this time through the brother he had spent 30 years looking down on. I didn't respond to that one either. By August, the radio silence from my end was driving my family crazy. I know this because my grandmother told me, and because the messages had evolved from requests to demands to outright guilt trips. My mom sent me a message calling me selfish, saying she couldn't believe she raised someone so heartless, saying I was abandoning my family in their time of need when they had always been there for me. That last part almost made me laugh out loud. Always been there for me? In what alternate reality? My dad tried a different approach. He sent me a long message about how he was disappointed in the man I had become, how success had changed me, how he remembered when I was a little boy who cared about family above everything else. He said he hoped I would find my way back to who I really was before it was too late. Brandon's messages got more aggressive. He called me a sellout, said I thought I was better than everyone, said I had always been jealous of him, and this was my way of finally getting revenge. The projection was almost too perfect. Through it all, I maintained my silence. Not because I was playing a game, not because I was trying to manipulate anyone, but because I had genuinely moved on. Their chaos wasn't my responsibility. Their financial problems weren't my concern. Their emotional needs weren't mine to manage. Then my mom showed up at my house. I don't know how she got my address. Probably from one of the extended family members who I had trusted to respect my boundaries. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening to find her sitting on my front porch, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Duke was going nuts inside, and I took a moment to compose myself before approaching. This was the first time I had seen her face to face since Christmas. Nearly 8 months of silence, and here she was, uninvited, on my doorstep. She stood up when she saw me coming. There were tears in her eyes. She started talking before I even reached the porch, words tumbling out about how sorry she was, how she didn't mean what she said at Christmas, how she was just stressed and took it out on me, how she had always loved me even if she didn't show it right. I let her talk. I stood there on my own walkway, keys in hand, and let her get it all out. The apologies, the excuses, the justifications, the tears, the pleas. She talked about how hard things had been since I left, how my absence had created a hole in the family, how she lay awake at night wondering where she went wrong, how she never realized how much her words could hurt until she saw me walk out that door on Christmas. It was a masterful performance, honestly. If I hadn't lived through 31 years of her behavior, I might have believed it. But I knew my mother. I knew how she operated. And I knew that tears from her usually preceded a request for something. When she finally stopped, I asked her one question. I asked her why she was really here. The tears stopped almost immediately. Her expression shifted. And there it was. The real reason. They needed money. Brandon's situation had gotten worse. There were legal issues now. Potential lawsuits from people he had recruited into the MLM. They were facing financial ruin, and they needed my help to prevent it. I nodded slowly. I told her I understood. I told her I appreciated her coming all this way. Then I told her no. Not angrily, not vindictively, just honestly. I said I wasn't going to bail out Brandon or fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I said if they needed financial advice, I could recommend some professionals who might help them restructure their debts. But I wasn't going to write a check to make their problems disappear. She tried arguing, pleading, guilting. She brought up everything she could think of. How she carried me for 9 months. How she sacrificed for me when I was young. How family was supposed to mean something. I asked her what family meant when she called me trash in front of everyone. What family meant when she spent 30 years favoring Brandon, while I had to earn everything on my own. What family meant when she never once acknowledged my accomplishments unless she needed something from me. She didn't have answers, just more tears, more deflection, more attempts to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. I told her she was welcome to stay at a hotel in town if she needed rest before traveling back. I offered to pay for one night as a courtesy, but I made it clear she wasn't staying at my house and that no amount of showing up uninvited was going to change my decision. She left without taking me up on the hotel offer. I watched her rental car disappear down my street, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no second guessing. Just the calm certainty that I had made the right choice. The months that followed my mom's visit were interesting. The family divide became permanent. Those who supported my decision maintained their relationships with me. Those who thought I was being cruel gradually stopped reaching out. And honestly, both outcomes were fine with me. My parents continued struggling. They sold their house and moved into a smaller apartment. My dad's part-time job became full-time. My mom's bookkeeping work expanded. They were, for the first time in their lives, facing actual financial consequences. Brandon bounced around for a while, couch surfing with friends. Brief stints at various jobs. Ashley had dumped him sometime around July when it became clear his business opportunity was actually a financial disaster. Last I heard, he was working at a warehouse somewhere, finally earning his own money for what might have been the first time ever. Did I feel bad for them? In some abstract way, maybe. They were still my family biologically. I didn't wish them genuine suffering, but I also wasn't willing to sacrifice my own well-being to rescue them from consequences of their own making. Rebecca and I got engaged in November. Duke was the ring bearer at our engagement party, which was exactly as adorable as it sounds. We bought a bigger house together, started talking about kids, built a life that felt genuinely fulfilling in ways I had never experienced growing up. The engagement party was perfect, just 30 people who actually cared about us. Friends from work, Rebecca's family who welcomed me like their own son, a few of my cousins who had reached out after Christmas. No drama, no hidden agendas, no one trying to diminish anyone else. Just genuine celebration of two people who found each other. Rebecca's parents flew in from Oregon for the occasion. Her dad pulled me aside at one point and told me he was glad his daughter found someone who understood the importance of boundaries. He knew about my situation because Rebecca had told them, and instead of judging me for cutting off family, they respected me for it. It was the first time I had experienced what supportive in-laws could feel like. The contrast with my own family was stark. We spent that winter planning our future, not just the wedding, but everything, where we wanted to live long-term, how many kids we might want, what kind of life we wanted to build. These conversations felt easy with Rebecca because neither of us carried the baggage of trying to please people who would never be satisfied. We were building something new, something ours, something that wasn't weighed down by generational dysfunction. My grandmother passed away in February of the following year, peacefully, in her sleep, at 83 years old. I flew back to Ohio for the funeral. It was the first time I had seen my parents and Brandon in over a year. The funeral was awkward, as expected. My mom tried to hug me like nothing had happened. I accepted the hug briefly and stepped back. My dad nodded at me from across the room. Brandon avoided eye contact entirely. We were strangers who happened to share DNA, and everyone in that funeral home could feel it. After the service, my mom pulled me aside. She looked genuinely older, more tired, more defeated. She said she had been thinking a lot about everything. She said she understood why I had pulled away. She said she wished things had been different. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than anything I had gotten before. I told her I appreciated that. I told her I hoped they were doing okay. I told her that I didn't hate her or Dad or Brandon. I just couldn't be part of a family that didn't respect me. She cried. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind from her visit to Arizona. She asked if there was any way we could start over, any way we could rebuild what had been broken. I thought about it, really thought about it. This wasn't a snap judgment. This was a moment I had imagined 1,000 times since walking out that Christmas night. I told her that rebuilding would require acknowledgement, real acknowledgement of the favoritism, real acknowledgement of the damage it caused, real acknowledgement that I had been treated as less than my entire life, not just words designed to get me to write a check, actual understanding of the harm that had been done. I told her that if she and Dad ever wanted to do the work of genuinely rebuilding our relationship, I would be open to it. But that work had to come from them. I wasn't going to coach them through it, or accept half measures, or pretend everything was fine for the sake of family harmony. She nodded, said she understood, said she would talk to my dad about it. That was 14 months ago. I got a letter from my mom last month. An actual handwritten letter, which she used to do when I was at college before the relationship deteriorated. It was 6 pages long. She went through specific memories from my childhood. The time they forgot my 15th birthday because Brandon had a soccer tournament. The time they skipped my college graduation ceremony because Brandon was sick with a cold. The way they always introduced Brandon first at family events, always talked about him more, always made me feel invisible. She acknowledged all of it, every single instance I had mentioned at the funeral, and a dozen more I had forgotten about. My dad added a page at the end. Shorter, more practical, but he admitted he failed me by never standing up when he should have. There was no request for money anywhere in that letter. No ask for anything. Just two people finally owning 30 years of mistakes. I called my mom the next day. First time in nearly 2 years. We talked for almost 3 hours. She cried. I didn't. I told her exactly what those years felt like. She listened without making excuses. That was new. 2 weeks later, they flew out to Arizona. I picked them up at the airport. My mom hugged me and didn't let go for a solid minute. My dad shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug too. First time he had done that since I was maybe 12 years old. They stayed for 5 days. Met Rebecca properly. Fell in love with Duke immediately. My dad spent an entire afternoon throwing a tennis ball in the backyard, while Duke ran himself ragged. My mom helped Rebecca pick out paint colors for the nursery. Normal family stuff. The kind of stuff I never thought I would have with them. On their last night, we sat on the back patio after dinner. My dad cleared his throat and said he had something to tell me. He said they had officially cut Brandon off. Completely. No more money, no more bailouts, no more covering his rent or his mistakes. He said they should have done it 20 years ago, but they were too scared he couldn't handle it. He said watching me walk away that Christmas made them realize they had been protecting the wrong son. My mom added that Brandon hadn't taken it well. He called them every name in the book, accused them of choosing me over him, threatened to never speak to them again. They let him. They said if he wanted to come back into their lives, he would have to do it on his terms as an adult, without expecting handouts. Last I heard, Brandon was still working at that warehouse, still living with some friend in a cramped apartment, still bitter, still blaming everyone but himself. Ashley dumped him 8 months ago when the money ran out. He tried reaching out to me once, about 3 months back, asked if I could loan him $5,000 to start a new business venture. I didn't respond. Rebecca and I got married in April. Small ceremony. 50 people. My parents were there, sitting in the front row. My mom cried through the whole thing. My dad walked up to me afterward and told me he was proud of me. First time he ever said those words to my face. Duke was the ring bearer. Custom tuxedo. Stole the show. Rebecca still has about 200 photos of him on her phone from that day alone. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. My graduation's on Saturday. Hope you can make it. My brother replied, "We'll be at a beach resort, maybe next time." My mom added, "Don't make this about you." I simply wrote, "Understood." What they saw on the news that night made the ocean the last thing on their minds. This happened about 8 months ago, and I'm still processing it all. Sorry for the wall of text, but I need to get this off my chest because what happened still keeps me up at night. Not from guilt, but from pure satisfaction. I-24. Male need you to understand the type of people I'm dealing with here. My dad Rick works construction when he feels like it, which isn't often. He's got an excuse for every failed job. Unfair boss, bad weather, hostile coworkers. Reality is he's lazy and unreliable. My mom Sandra has never held a job longer than 6 months. She's too busy playing victim on Facebook and blowing money on essential oils and lottery tickets. Every time she gets fired, it's because her boss was threatened by her potential or coworkers were jealous. Never her fault, obviously. My older brother Daniel is 26 and basically a carbon copy of our parents. All talk, no action, always looking for the easy way out. He's been between opportunities for 2 years, living in Sandra's basement playing video games while she makes excuses for him. The favoritism started early. When I was 8 and Daniel was 10, we both broke windows playing baseball. I got grounded for 2 weeks and paid for my window with allowance money. Daniel got taken to McDonald's because accidents happen and at least he's active. When I got straight A's at 12, Sandra glanced and said, "That's nice, honey." Then spent 20 minutes gushing over Daniel's C+ in PE because he's really improving. They'd rewrite history constantly. Sandra would brag about Daniel being so athletic and popular, while I was the quiet one, or kind of a loner. Never mind that Daniel got kicked off baseball for skipping practice, or that his friends just came over for free food and internet. The double standards were incredible. Daniel could crash Dad's truck while texting and get a newer one with a boys will be boys shrug. When I asked for help with college application fees, Sandra told me to stop being so entitled. Daniel could come home at 3 a.m. making noise, leaving messes, eating everything. Just Daniel being Daniel. If I left one dish in the sink, I'd get lectures about responsibility. But here's the thing. I actually did something about it. I put myself through engineering school working nights at a warehouse and weekends doing computer repair for elderly folks. 4 years of 3-hour sleep nights, eating nothing but protein bars and instant coffee, watching classmates party while I moved boxes, or explained to 75-year-olds why their computer had 47 viruses. The warehouse job was brutal. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., with a supervisor who seemed personally offended by college students. I'd drag myself to morning classes, fighting to stay awake during fluid dynamics lectures. The computer work paid better, but was unpredictable. Late-night calls for broken computers that just needed to be plugged in. But I needed every dollar for my $850 a month studio in a neighborhood where sirens were the nightly soundtrack. My family found this hilarious. Daniel constantly made college boy jokes, doing impressions of me studying with a nerdy voice. Sandra would laugh, telling relatives I was putting on airs and thinking I'm better than everyone. She'd post passive-aggressive Facebook updates about some people thinking education makes them special. Rick ignored me unless he needed tech support, then became my best friend until his laptop was fixed. The moment I'd finish helping, back to pretending I didn't exist. But graduating engineering school isn't something you just do. Less than 60% make it through. The coursework is brutal. Professor Martinez's advanced calculus midterms left students crying in hallways. My structural analysis professor assigned 6 to 8 hour homework problems due every other day. One semester with 18 credit hours, 35 warehouse hours, plus extra computer jobs. I survived on 4 hours of sleep and energy drinks. Lost 15 pounds from stress. I'd sit in the warehouse parking lot wondering if I was insane, maintaining a 3.7 GPA while working 50-plus hours weekly. Every achievement got minimized. Dean's list? That's nice, followed by gushing about Daniel's promotion to shift leader at fast food. Advanced engineering program acceptance? Rick's only comment. Hope you know what you're doing with all that debt. Rich coming from someone who bought Daniel a $15,000 truck while he already owed on another car loan. Apparently, my student loans were irresponsible, but Daniel's multiple car payments were just helping him get established. I wasn't just complaining about being the unfavorite. I was building something real while they celebrated mediocrity. 3 weeks before graduation, I sent a message to our family group chat. Graduation ceremony is May 15th at 2 p.m. at the University Stadium. Would mean a lot if you guys could make it. I'd been thinking about this text for weeks. How do you ask your family to show up for the biggest day of your life when you already know they probably won't? I must have typed and deleted that message 20 times, trying to find the right balance between hopeful and not too needy. I'd already mailed them official invitations 2 months earlier, the fancy ones with the gold seal and everything. I'd written personal notes on each one, explaining what the day meant to me and how much their presence would mean. The invitations probably cost me $50 I couldn't afford, but I thought the gesture might show them how serious this was to me. Nobody had responded to those. Not even an okay or we'll see. Just complete silence. Like I'd mailed them grocery store flyers instead of invitations to the biggest achievement of my life. I figured this text was my last shot at getting them to show up. Maybe the formal invitations had gotten lost in the mail, or they'd forgotten the date, or they just needed a gentle reminder. The response came faster than I expected, and it wasn't what I wanted to hear. Daniel wrote back, "Bro, we're gonna be in Atlantic City that weekend. Casinos calling my name." The casualness of it hit me like a punch in the gut. No sorry or wish we could be there or even congratulations. Just a cheerful announcement about their gambling trip, complete with emoji like he was telling me about a fun movie he was planning to watch. Before I could even process that, Sandra chimed in, "Don't expect us to cancel our plans just because you want attention. Stop being so dramatic, Jake." That word, dramatic, was like a trigger for me. That's what she'd called me my whole life, whenever I wanted recognition for anything. When I cried after they missed my middle school graduation, I was being dramatic. When I got upset about them not coming to my high school award ceremony, I was being dramatic. Apparently, wanting your family to celebrate your achievements was just me being dramatic again. Then Rick, who usually never replies to anything, "Your brother deserves this trip. He's been stressed lately." Stressed from what exactly? Daniel's biggest daily challenge was deciding which video game to play. His most recent stress had been about whether to order pizza or Chinese food for dinner. But apparently he deserved a vacation while I was working 2 jobs to pay for school. I stared at my phone screen for probably 5 minutes, reading those messages over and over. Part of me wanted to blow up at them, to tell them exactly what I thought about their priorities. Part of me wanted to remind them that I was the first person in our family's history to graduate from college, that this was actually a big deal, that I'd been working toward this for 4 years. Part of me wanted to beg them to reconsider. I could picture myself typing out a long message about how much this meant to me, how I'd been dreaming of this day since I started school, how I just wanted them to be proud of me for once. But I already knew how that would go. More comments about me being dramatic and needy. Instead, I just typed, "Got it." That was it. 2 words, no big argument, no emotional plea, no guilt trip. Just acknowledgement that I finally understood where I ranked in their list of priorities. But those 2 words took everything I had. I must have typed and deleted a dozen different responses before settling on something that wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how much they'd hurt me. The thing that really got to me wasn't even that they were skipping my graduation. It was that they'd rather spend money they didn't have on Daniel's gambling habit than celebrate the biggest achievement of my life. Sandra had been posting about this Atlantic City trip for weeks. Much needed family time. Daniel deserves to have fun. Sometimes you have to treat yourself. The Facebook posts were the worst part. She'd share articles about supporting your children's dreams and post inspirational quotes about family, then turn around and dismiss my actual achievements. She'd posted a meme just the week before about how a mother's love knows no bounds, while literally planning to skip her son's college graduation. Treat yourself with what money? Rick hadn't worked a full week in months. Sandra was unemployed as usual, and Daniel was living off whatever he could guilt out of them. But somehow they had cash for Atlantic City hotels and casino chips. I did the math later. A weekend in Atlantic City, hotel, food, gambling money, they were probably looking at $1,500 minimum. That was more than I made in a month at the warehouse. Money they claimed not to have when I asked for help with anything school-related. When I'd asked for help with my graduation cap and gown rental, $150, Sandra had told me that money doesn't grow on trees, and I needed to learn to budget better. But apparently $1,500 for Daniel's casino trip was just good family fun. The loneliness of achievement. The weeks leading up to graduation were weird. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, and tried not to think about walking across that stage alone. My engineering cohort was tight-knit. We'd been through academic hell together, but most had families coming from out of state, booking hotels months in advance. My study partner, Lisa, was stressed about having enough graduation tickets for her entire extended family. My friend Marcus had relatives flying in from Puerto Rico. The guy from Thermodynamics was worried about restaurant reservations for his family's fancy celebration dinner. I had my neighbor. This sweet elderly lady had basically adopted me after discovering I was putting myself through school. It started when I helped her carry groceries upstairs. She noticed how exhausted I looked and started asking about my schedule. When she learned about my night shifts and day classes, she began bringing leftovers. "You too skinny," she'd say, handing me containers of homemade soup. "College boys need to eat good food." She'd ask about grades, classes, career plans. She understood maybe half of what I told her about engineering, but she'd nod and ask follow-up questions like she was genuinely interested. When I showed her my Dean's List certificate, she insisted on making photocopies to send to her sister. When I mentioned my family couldn't make graduation, she looked genuinely upset. "Family should be there for big day. This very important. You work so hard." Then she brightened. "I come cheer for you. Someone needs to cheer for Jake." I be very loud. It meant everything, but also highlighted how alone I really was. Here I was, about to become the first college graduate in family history, and the only person who cared enough to show up was someone I'd known for less than 2 years. Thursday before graduation, while doing computer work for a regular client, I got a call from Sandra. Unusual. She only called when she wanted something. "Jake, I need your help," she said, without hello. Classic Sandra. No pleasantries, straight to demands. "I'm trying to book this Atlantic City hotel, but the website's confusing. Can you put it on your card and I'll pay you back?" I couldn't believe it. She wanted me to pay for their hotel for the trip they were taking, instead of coming to my graduation. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only were they choosing Daniel's gambling over my graduation, they wanted me to fund it. "I don't have that kind of money, Sandra." "Don't be like that. It's only $400 for 2 nights. You have that job money saved up." My job money. Like it was some luxury fund instead of survival money. That $400 was half my rent, 2 weeks of groceries, The buffer between making rent and choosing between electricity and food. I can't do it. Fine. Be selfish then. But don't come crying to us when you need help. Family is supposed to help family, but I guess you forgot that. She hung up. I sat there feeling this mix of anger and sadness. They wanted me to fund the trip they were taking to avoid me. The symbolism was almost too perfect. They literally wanted me to pay for them to avoid celebrating my achievement. Graduation day was absolutely beautiful. Clear skies, perfect 75 degrees, the kind of day that makes you feel like good things are possible. The stadium was packed with families, balloons everywhere, that electric feeling of celebration in the air. I found my place with the other engineering graduates, all wearing our special colored cords. We'd made it through one of the toughest programs, survived Professor Martinez's calculus, Dr. Kim's brutal physics, and the senior design project that consumed our final semester. My neighbor showed up in her best dress with a handmade sign, "Congratulations, Jake," in glittery letters. She'd brought her teenage grandson to help navigate the crowd and take pictures. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You worked so hard for this day." She gave me this tight hug that reminded me what it felt like to have someone actually care about your achievements. Her grandson, probably embarrassed, managed to smile and, "Congratulations, man, that's really cool." The ceremony was long. Over 300 graduates, speeches from deans about entering the real world. But there was something magical about being surrounded by people who'd worked just as hard, who understood what getting through this program meant. When they called engineering graduates, we all stood together. I could hear my neighbor's voice cutting through everything. "That's my Jake, engineering student." When they called my name and I walked across that stage, the feeling was indescribable. 4 years of exhaustion, stress, financial worry, family disappointment, it all led to this moment. I shook hands with the dean, accepted my diploma cover, and heard my neighbor screaming louder than families 5 times the size. "That's my Jake! He works so hard! Engineering!" she yelled, and half the stadium turned to look. It was embarrassing and perfect. The photographer captured it perfectly. Me in cap and gown, genuine smile, holding my diploma, with my neighbor visible in the background, cheering like a maniac. That photo sits framed on my desk at work now. After the ceremony, she insisted on taking me and my engineering buddies to lunch at her favorite place. She was so excited, introducing me to the waitress as my Jake the engineer, and ordering way too much food because celebration must have good food. We spent 3 hours sharing war stories about the worst professors and hardest exams. For the first time in 4 years, I could actually relax and enjoy what I'd accomplished. My neighbor kept asking questions, understanding maybe 20% of the technical details but loving seeing us happy. But around 6 p.m., my phone started going crazy. Call after call from Sandra, Daniel, and Rick. Text messages flooding in. "Call me right now. Where are you? Answer your phone. This is urgent. Jake pickup. We need you. Emergency." I ignored them initially. They'd made their choice about priorities. This was my day, and I wasn't letting them ruin it with whatever drama they'd created. But the messages kept coming, getting more frantic. My phone buzzed constantly, disrupting the celebration. Finally, my neighbor noticed. "Jake, maybe family emergency? You should check. Sometimes emergency, really emergency." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside and called Sandra back. She answered on the first ring, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Jake, where the heck have you been? We've been calling for hours." "I was at my graduation dinner." "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" "We're sitting in a police station in Atlantic City because they're saying we used a stolen credit card, and I don't know what's happening, and you need to help us figure this out." My blood went cold. Even through her panic and the bad phone connection, I could hear the seriousness in her voice. This wasn't Sandra being dramatic about some minor inconvenience. This was real fear. "What are you talking about? They arrested Daniel at the casino, and now they're saying the hotel was paid for with fraud, and we don't know what to do, and you need to come down here or send money for a lawyer or something." I could hear Daniel in the background yelling about how this was all a misunderstanding. Rick was arguing with someone, demanding to know his rights. There were other voices too, official-sounding people asking questions, phones ringing, that background noise you hear in police stations on TV shows. "I don't understand how this involves me, because they're saying it was your credit card that was used for the hotel." The world stopped. My credit card. The one I'd told Sandra I couldn't use to pay for their trip just a week earlier. The one she'd gotten angry at me for refusing to hand over. "Sandra, tell me you didn't use my card information." Silence on the other end for about 5 seconds. In the background, I could hear a police officer asking someone to please sit down and wait for your turn. Then, in a much smaller voice than before, "It's not what you think. Did you use my credit card without permission? We were going to pay you back. Daniel was sure he was going to win big at the poker tables, and then we'd give you all the money back plus extra for the trouble. It wasn't supposed to be like this." The audacity was staggering. They'd taken my card information, probably from old mail or documents I'd left behind during visits, and used it to fund their gambling trip. They'd literally stolen from me to pay for the vacation they were taking instead of attending my graduation. "You stole from me to pay for your trip? Don't be so dramatic. Families borrow from each other all the time. We were going to pay you back as soon as Daniel hit it big." Daniel hit it big. They'd gambled with my financial future based on Daniel's poker skills. Daniel, who'd never held a steady job for more than 6 months. Daniel, who thought he was a gambling genius because he'd won $50 on scratch-off tickets once. I hung up immediately and called my bank. The automated system put me on hold for what felt like an eternity. While I waited, I tried to process what had just happened. My own family had committed credit card fraud using my information on my graduation day. While I was celebrating the biggest achievement of my life, they were being arrested for stealing from me. Finally, I got through to the fraud department. "Yes, sir, we show several unauthorized charges on your account over the past 3 days. Hotel bookings, restaurant charges, and casino cash advances totaling $3,400. $3,400. I had to ask him to repeat it, because I was sure I'd heard wrong. $3,400 in unauthorized charges, sir. We've already flagged the account for suspicious activity and frozen it pending investigation." That was more than 4 months of rent. Money I needed for starting my career, for moving to a better apartment, for finally getting my life on track after graduation. Money I'd saved by working nights and weekends while going to school full-time, skipping meals and social events, and anything that cost money. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They'd stolen my future to fund Daniel's gambling addiction. I walked back into the restaurant in a daze. My neighbor took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. "Jake, what happened? You look sick." I sat down heavily in my chair. My engineering buddies stopped mid-conversation and stared at me. My family just got arrested for using my credit card without permission to pay for their Atlantic City trip. The table went quiet. Steve was the first to speak. "Dude, are you serious?" I nodded, still trying to process it myself. "They stole $3,400 from me while I was graduating, while they were supposed to be here celebrating with me." Lisa looked stunned. "Your own family?" My neighbor, despite her limited English, understood enough. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Jake. You deserve better family than this." The next few days were a whirlwind of police reports, bank fraud claims, and legal consultations. My account was frozen pending investigation, leaving me with $60 in cash and a credit card I was afraid to use. The bank investigator was thorough and professional. She walked me through every charge, documented my relationship to the thieves, and reviewed the evidence. The hotel had clear security footage of Sandra using my card at check-in. The casino had surveillance video of Daniel withdrawing cash advances, bragging to other players about his system. "This is a clear case of identity theft and fraud," the investigator told me. "Since it crosses state lines and involves multiple institutions, we'll be working with federal authorities." Federal authorities. My family hadn't just committed a crime. They'd committed a federal crime. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it's exactly the launch pad you need. Monday after graduation, I got a call from Brennan Engineering, one of the biggest firms in the state. They wanted to interview me for a junior project manager position. Starting salary, $78,000 a year. More money than I'd ever imagined. More than my parents had ever made combined. I showed up Wednesday in my only good suit and absolutely nailed it. The interview panel asked technical questions about structural analysis and project management scenarios. But what really impressed them was my work experience. 4 years of working 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.7 GPA had given me a work ethic most recent graduates couldn't match. "Most new graduates talk about theoretical knowledge," the department manager told me. "You talk about practical application. That's rare and valuable." They offered me the position Friday with a $5,000 signing bonus and full benefits starting Monday. I walked out floating. After years of financial stress and family drama, I finally had real stability. While my family dealt with legal troubles in Atlantic City, I was apartment hunting in the nice part of town for the first time in my life. The investigation moved quickly. Since the charges crossed state lines and involved organized fraud, they'd planned this trip for weeks, knowing they'd use my card. The FBI got involved. The evidence was overwhelming. Hotel receipts, casino surveillance, even text messages between Sandra and Daniel discussing their plan to pay me back with winnings. They weren't just criminals. They were stupid criminals who'd left a paper trail a mile wide. Local news picked up the story within a week. Local family arrested in multi-state credit card fraud scheme. The headline featured 3 mugshots. Sandra looking defiant and angry, Daniel confused and scared, Rick like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The article detailed how a local family used a stolen credit card belonging to a recent college graduate to fund their gambling vacation. It didn't mention names, but in a town of 50,000 people, word spread quickly. By the time they made it back from Atlantic City, Daniel released on bail, Sandra and Rick facing charges. I'd started my new job, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with actual parking and a dishwasher, and begun the most satisfying chapter of my life. 3 months after graduation, the legal case was reaching its conclusion. The evidence was overwhelming. Hotel receipts, casino surveillance footage, bank records, even text messages where Daniel bragged about hitting it big with Jake's money. The prosecutor offered plea deals to avoid a lengthy trial. Daniel's lawyer advised him to take it. 18 months in state prison plus full restitution was better than the 3 to 5 years he was facing if convicted on all charges. Sandra's deal was even better. 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine, plus restitution. Rick avoided criminal charges, but was named in the civil restitution case since he'd benefited from the fraudulent trip. The financial judgment alone was crushing. They owed me the $3,400 plus interest, legal fees, and punitive damages. The total came to just over $12,000. For people who could barely scrape together rent money, it might as well have been $12 million. But the social consequences were almost worse than the legal ones. Our hometown isn't huge, maybe 50,000 people, and news travels fast. The local newspaper covered the sentencing, complete with photos and details about the family who'd stolen from their son and brother on his graduation day. Everyone knew about the arrests, the trial, and the family drama. Sandra couldn't go to the grocery store without people whispering and pointing. Rick lost his regular crew and couldn't find steady work anywhere in the county. His reputation in the construction community was completely destroyed. Daniel's incarceration became something of a local legend. The story of the guy who went to prison for stealing his brother's money to gamble, while that same brother was graduating from engineering school, was the kind of cautionary tale people told to illustrate bad decision-making. Meanwhile, I was being profiled in engineering magazines as an inspirational success story. The local newspaper that had covered my family's arrest also did a feature story on young professionals making a difference in the community. There was my photo on the front page of the business section, standing in front of a bridge project I'd helped design. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While they were dealing with court dates and social humiliation, I was getting promoted at work and building a national reputation in my field. My second promotion came just 8 months after starting. Senior project manager, $95,000 salary, company car allowance. I was 24 years old and making more money than most people in our town made after decades in their careers. The local newspaper article mentioned my engineering degree, my rapid career advancement, and my upcoming speaking engagement at the state engineering conference. It also mentioned almost in passing that I was the son of local residents recently convicted of credit card fraud, which was probably the most polite way possible to reference the family scandal. I know my family saw the article because Sandra's sister called to congratulate me. She mentioned that Sandra had been really struggling since seeing the article and knowing how well I was doing. The first plea for help came about 4 months after the sentencing, in the form of a handwritten letter from Sandra. Their internet service had been shut off for non-payment, so she couldn't email or use social media to contact me. The letter was written on notebook paper in her sloppy handwriting, complete with crossouts and spelling mistakes. Jake, I know we made terrible mistakes and there's no excuse for what we did, but we're family and family is supposed to forgive each other and help each other through hard times. Daniel is in jail and it's killing me every day, knowing my baby is locked up with criminals. Rick can't find steady work because everyone thinks we're criminals too. I can't afford my blood pressure medication and we're 2 months behind on rent and I don't know what we're going to do. You're doing so well now and we see your picture in the paper and we're so proud of you. Even though we never got to tell you that properly. I know we messed up your graduation and I know we hurt you, but we're desperate now. Can you please find it in your heart to help us? We'll pay you back as soon as we get back on our feet. I promise, on my mother's grave. You're the only one in the family who made it and we need you. Your mother who loves you, Sandra P.S. Can you also help with Daniel's commissary account? He says the food is terrible and he needs money for soap and things. I read it twice, noting the manipulation techniques she was using, playing the victim, invoking family obligation, promising to pay me back, even asking for extra money for Daniel's comfort in prison. Then I put it in my desk drawer without responding. 2 weeks later, Daniel called from county jail. Collect calls from inmates show up with a special recording, so I knew exactly what it was before I answered. But I was curious to hear what he had to say for himself. Jake, bro, thank God you answered. I know I messed up bad, like really bad, but I'm about to lose everything here. Emma's completely done with me. Mom and Dad are about to get evicted, and I'm looking at real prison time when this gets transferred to state. You're the only one in the family who made something of himself. Can you help us out with a lawyer? Like a real lawyer, not this public defender who doesn't care? Or maybe just help Mom and Dad with rent so they don't end up on the street? His voice was shaky, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Prison was clearly not agreeing with Daniel's previous lifestyle of video games and Mom's cooking. I swear on everything I'll make it up to you when I get out. I'll get a real job, I'll pay you back with interest, whatever you want. Just please don't let our family fall apart because of my stupid mistake. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He sounded genuinely remorseful, more mature than I'd ever heard him. Then I remembered my frozen bank account. My graduation day spent explaining to fraud investigators why my own family had stolen from me. I hung up without saying a word. Rick tried a different approach. He showed up at my office building on a Tuesday afternoon, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. He'd lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had that defeated look of a man whose pride had been completely broken. The security guard in the lobby called up to ask if I wanted to see him. Tell him I'm in a meeting, I said. But I watched from my office window as he stood in the parking lot for over an hour, probably hoping to catch me leaving. He looked older, beaten down in a way that almost made me feel bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the times he'd ignored my achievements, all the family events where Daniel was celebrated while I was dismissed, all the occasions where he'd chosen to support Daniel's laziness over my hard work. When I finally left the building through a side exit 2 hours later, he was gone. The most pathetic attempt came 6 weeks later. Sandra had somehow managed to create a GoFundMe page titled, "Help a Family Destroyed by False Accusations." The description was a masterpiece of victimhood and manipulation. Our family has been torn apart by a terrible misunderstanding that has been blown completely out of proportion. My son Daniel made a mistake trying to help our family during a difficult time, but now he's in prison, and we're facing homelessness because of false accusations and media attention that has destroyed our reputation in the community. We are good people who made one error in judgment, and now we're being punished far beyond what we deserve. My other son Jake has done very well for himself, but has turned his back on his family in our darkest hour. We just need help getting back on our feet and clearing our names so we can rebuild our lives. Any donation would be appreciated as we struggle to pay rent, buy groceries, and support Daniel while he's incarcerated for something that should have been handled as a family matter. She shared it on every social media platform she could access, tagged me in posts asking why I wasn't helping my own family, and even had some of their friends message me directly asking how I could abandon them in their time of need. The GoFundMe raised $127 over 2 weeks before being reported and taken down for containing false information about the legal case. But not before several people who knew the real story commented with corrections. This family stole money from their son on his college graduation day to fund a gambling trip. There was nothing false about the accusations. They admitted guilt in court. Jake worked his way through engineering school while his family mocked his efforts. Then they used his credit card without permission to pay for a casino vacation. He doesn't owe them anything. I know this family. The son who's doing well deserves credit for rising above their toxic behavior, not criticism for protecting himself from people who would steal from their own child. But here's the beautiful irony. Every attempt they made to get my help only made them look worse. People could look up the court records online. They could see the local newspaper coverage of the arrests and sentencing. They could read Sandra's own Facebook posts from before the arrest, where she'd bragged about the Atlantic City trip and dismissed my graduation. Every time they tried to play victim, it reminded everyone that they were criminals, trying to manipulate their successful family member into bailing them out. Every social media post, every GoFundMe share, every public plea just reinforced the narrative that they were toxic people who'd steal from their own son and then blame him for not forgiving them. The last direct contact came almost exactly 1 year after my graduation. I was at a coffee shop near my office, reviewing project plans for a new municipal building, when Sandra walked in. She looked terrible, thin, tired, wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was graying and unkempt, and she moved with the defeated posture of someone who'd lost everything. She spotted me immediately, probably not hard since I was wearing a nice suit and working on a laptop in a coffee shop that cost more per cup than she was making per hour. She walked straight to my table without hesitation. "Jake, please, just 5 minutes." I looked up from my laptop. She looked even worse up close. Dark circles under her eyes, hands that shook slightly from stress or medication, the kind of exhaustion that comes from months of financial and emotional pressure. "I don't think we have anything to discuss. Your brother is getting out next month and we don't have anywhere for him to stay. We lost the house 6 months ago. Rick and I are living in a one-bedroom apartment that costs more than half my income from the gas station, and it's not enough and I don't know what else to do." She was crying now, not loudly, but with tears running down her cheeks. Other customers were starting to notice the disturbance. "You destroyed my graduation day. You stole my money. You committed crimes using my identity? And now you want me to solve your problems? We're your family. We raised you and fed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years. Doesn't that count for something?" The audacity was still there, even in her desperation. She was trying to claim credit for doing the bare minimum that parents are legally required to do, while ignoring years of emotional neglect and the criminal betrayal that had brought us to this point. "No," I said, closing my laptop and standing up. "Family shows up for each other's graduations. Family doesn't steal money from each other to fund gambling trips. Family doesn't try to destroy someone's financial future to pay for their own entertainment." I walked past her toward the door, then turned back for one final comment. "I hope Daniel finds somewhere to stay when he gets out. I hope you figure out your housing situation. I hope Rick finds steady work. But none of that is my responsibility anymore. You made your choices and I made mine. My mom said we can't be in two places at once. When I was in ICU and chose my bro's wedding, they spent thousands on his honeymoon instead of my hospital bills. Everyone cut them off, and their life is falling apart fast. Hey, Reddit. My parents always had a favorite kid, and it sure wasn't me. I broke my spine 2 days before my brother's wedding, got left in the hospital alone, then blamed for ruining everything. They lied to the family, but the truth came out. Let me start from the top. My name's Elliot, I'm 26, and this whole mess started 2 days before my brother's wedding. Matthias is the golden child of the family. He's 2 years older, straight A's growing up, football team captain, now working some corporate job that my parents brag about like he invented the internet or something. Me? I was the kid who blended into the wallpaper. Did fine in school, worked through college, but no one ever introduced me as their pride and joy. And to be fair, I didn't really care. Matthias was the star, and I was used to it. It only got weird when my family made everything about him, even when it had nothing to do with him, like this wedding. My mom had been planning it like it was the royal wedding part 2. Dad basically turned into her assistant. And me? I was supposed to be the best man. But I learned later that one of Matthias's college friends stepped in as best man. Money was tight for me at the time. Student loans, rent, you name it. So when a buddy told me about this temporary construction gig that paid decent, I jumped on it. My plan was simple. Work 2 weeks, make enough to cover the tux rental, wedding gift, and maybe have some leftover for bills. Nothing crazy, just a short job to help out a bit. The site was on the edge of town, small commercial project, nothing that looked sketchy from the outside. A few metal frames, some scaffolding, piles of drywall stacked around. I wasn't new to labor jobs. I'd done warehouse work before. But this was my first time on a site with heights involved. The foreman did a safety talk, handed out helmets, pointed at the harnesses, told us to stay clipped in. Standard stuff. It was hot that day. The kind of heat where metal burns your hands if you forget your gloves for 2 seconds. We were working on the second level of scaffolding, bolting some metal sheets into place. I remember the smell of the dust and the sharp metallic sound every time someone dropped a wrench on the frame. Then it happened. I heard this loud ping, like metal snapping. The plank under my feet jerked hard, then dropped on one side. My stomach flipped before my brain caught up. I grabbed at the rail, but it swung loose with me. Whole thing collapsed like someone yanked the rug out. I don't remember the fall clearly. Just flashes. Sky. Ground. Someone yelling my name. Then pain slammed through my back like I'd landed on a bed of bricks. Next thing I know, there's chaos. Hard hats running around. Someone shouting for an ambulance. My legs felt wrong. Not like a sleep wrong. Just wrong. Breathing hurt. I kept trying to shift to see my legs, but they told me to stay still. At the hospital, everything blurred together. Bright lights, people in scrubs moving fast, someone asking if I had family to call. I mumbled my parents' number. A nurse wrote it down and disappeared. The doctor leaned over me at one point and said, You've got spinal fractures and a broken femur. We need to operate now. I nodded because what else do you say? That's when my best friend Jackson showed up. He looked pale as hell, kept asking the staff if I was going to be okay. They handed him a clipboard because my parents weren't there yet. It was admission and emergency contact paperwork, so he filled it out. I drifted in and out while they wheeled me somewhere. Right before I went under, I heard one of the nurses on the phone saying, "Yes, ma'am, he's about to go into surgery." Yes, I understand, but then she hung up and muttered, "She said they can't make it. Rehearsal dinner tonight." I thought I misheard. I had to have misheard. When I woke up after surgery, I was in the ICU, monitors chirping, a blood pressure cuff biting my arm. Jackson was in the chair by the bed, looking wrecked. He told me they put rods in my leg, screws in my spine, and that my parents knew but were still at the rehearsal. He'd called them himself. They said they'll come tomorrow, he muttered, shaking his head. I didn't even know what to say. The pain meds made everything foggy, but I remember feeling this weird mix of anger and disbelief. Like, yeah, it was Matthias's big weekend, but I was in a hospital bed full of metal rods. Tomorrow? Really? The nurses came in and out, checking vitals, telling me not to move too much. At some point, a guy from the site dropped by to see how I was doing. He said the scaffolding supplier was sending reps to check the wreckage, that OSHA might get involved. I barely processed it. I never heard anything after that. If there was an investigation, it happened without me. When I woke up, it felt like my spine had been replaced with fire. The lights above me were harsh. The room smelled like antiseptic, and for a second, I couldn't even tell if it was day or night. My throat was dry and my voice cracked when I tried to speak. "Hey, easy," Jackson said from the chair next to my bed. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept. "You've been out for hours." Surgery went okay, but it was bad, Elliot. Real bad. I asked what time it was. He told me it was noon. Wedding rehearsal had been last night. The actual wedding was tomorrow. "Did my parents come?" I asked. He hesitated. "No, they said they're busy." "Busy?" I repeated. "Yeah, rehearsal dinner," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "I called them this morning. They said they'll come by after the wedding's over." I didn't answer right away, because I honestly didn't know what to say. My back throbbed like someone had stuck a car jack under my ribs. A nurse came in with a clipboard, checked the monitors, then asked if I wanted to try sitting up. I tried. My body protested immediately. My ribs felt like they were caving in, my leg felt wrong, and my head spun so hard I almost blacked out. The nurse told me to take deep breaths, like that was going to fix anything. After she left, Jackson told me he tried calling Matthias too. Straight to voicemail. No callback. A little later, Mom texted me that she'd already told him I was in the ICU, and they'd come after the wedding. The doctor showed up mid-afternoon. He explained the damage like he was reading off a grocery list. Broken femur, 3 spinal fractures, 2 cracked ribs, and a long recovery ahead. Physical therapy. Months of it. Maybe a year before things felt close to normal. He said it like normal was even still an option. And through all this, my family was out having wine and giving speeches like nothing had happened. Later, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. Jackson put it on speaker. "Hi, Elliot," she said, way too cheerful. "We can't be in 2 places at once, you know? The wedding's tomorrow, so much to do. We'll check in after things settle. Hope you're resting." That was it. Like she was leaving a note about running late for dinner, not her son being in the ICU. I stared at the phone. Jackson swore under his breath. An hour later, my cousin texted me, "Hey, are you coming to the reception tomorrow?" I wrote back, "Can't. In the hospital. Surgery yesterday." She answered, "Wait, what? Since when?" I told her it was 2 days ago. She didn't text back after that. The next morning, wedding day, I was still in the hospital bed, barely able to move. Jackson left around noon to shower and grab food. While he was gone, I watched other patients get visitors. Husbands, wives, kids, people bringing flowers, cards, balloons. No one from my family came for me. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Mom again, same tone. "Hey, honey, just wanted to say we're at the wedding now. It's beautiful. You'd love it. Big day today. We'll swing by when things quiet down. Hope you're feeling better." She said it like I was homesick with a cold, not stuck in a hospital bed with metal rods in my spine. I listened twice, saved it, then put the phone down. From Facebook posts, I got the highlights. Matthias in his tux, his bride glowing, my parents smiling like they were hosting a royal event. Caption after caption about family first and best day ever. I stopped scrolling after 10 minutes. That evening, Jackson came back with takeout. He tried talking about sports, random memes, whatever he could think of to fill the silence. I picked at my food, mostly pushing it around. You want me to call them again? He asked finally. No point, I said. They made their choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Machines beeped. Someone down the hall kept coughing. Nurses laughed about something at the desk. By the time the wedding weekend ended, I had a couple of messages, 0 visits, and a very clear picture of where I stood in my family's list of priorities. The Monday after, a nurse asked if my parents were coming soon to help plan my discharge. I told her not to hold her breath, because at that point, I already knew. The hospital days blurred together after the wedding weekend. Every morning, some doctor or nurse came in with a clipboard, asking if I had family who could take me in once I was released. I kept giving the same answer. I'll figure it out. Meanwhile, Jackson's parents had already offered to let me stay at their place while I recovered. They had a spare room, no stairs, and the kind of people who stocked soup and crackers like it was their job. They didn't ask for anything in return. Just told me to focus on healing. Inpatient PT started in week 2. The first time they tried getting me upright with a walker, I nearly collapsed. My left leg couldn't take my weight, and my back screamed like it was about to snap again. The therapist kept saying things like, "You're making progress," even though all I managed was standing for 30 seconds before sweating like I ran a marathon. No calls from my parents, no visits. Matthias didn't text either. Not once. The only people showing up were Jackson, his girlfriend Riley sometimes, and 2 of my college friends who brought bad vending machine coffee and tried to keep things light. We played dumb mobile games on my phone between PT sessions. They made the time pass. My parents finally showed up in week 3. I didn't even recognize them at first. My mom had on this bright floral dress like she came from some garden party. My dad carried grocery store flowers wrapped in crinkly plastic. "Elliot," Mom said like she was announcing me to someone. I was propped up in bed, wearing the brace they strapped around my torso to keep my spine from moving too much. My leg had metal rods, fresh scars running down the side. "You look okay," Dad said finally. I didn't answer right away. They put the flowers on the little table by my bed. My mom sat, smoothed her dress, then said, "You know, this whole thing really took the focus off Matthias's wedding." I thought I misheard. "Excuse me?" I said. She sighed like I was being difficult. "People were confused, Elliot. Some relatives asked why you weren't there. It made things awkward. You could have told people you were fine so they didn't worry." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Dad cleared his throat. "Your brother felt like the accident overshadowed the day a little. Obviously, we're glad you're okay, but it was hard for him too." I looked down at my brace because looking at them made me feel like I was losing my mind. "Hard for him?" I repeated. "I fell 3 stories and broke my spine. Sorry that ruined the party." Neither of them said anything. When they left, they told me to keep them updated. Like I was sending postcards from vacation instead of sitting in a hospital bed, learning to walk again. That night, Jackson came by with his mom. She brought homemade soup that didn't taste like cardboard. I told them about the visit. Jackson swore under his breath again. His mom shook her head, muttering something about people having messed up priorities. Over the next week, the physical therapy got harder. Longer sessions, less help from the staff, so I had to rely on my arms and the walker more. Every step felt like someone was jamming a knife into my lower back, but I kept doing it. Matthias finally called once, not to ask how I was doing. Number. He called to say he didn't want drama, and hoped I understood why things happened the way they did. I told him I broke my spine, not a piñata. He said I was being intense. When I was finally cleared to leave the hospital, my parents didn't offer to take me in. Didn't even ask. Jackson's parents showed up with their SUV, loaded my bag, and drove me to their place like it was the most normal thing in the world. They set me up in their guest room with a recliner, a pile of pillows, and the Wi-Fi password taped to the wall. My mom texted later that night, "Glad you're out. Keep us posted." I stared at it for a long time before putting the phone face down, because at that point, there wasn't anything left to say. The first week at Jackson's parents' place was slow. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Short walks from the bedroom to the living room with a cane. A list of exercises taped to the wall next to the recliner. Jackson's mom cooked like she was training for a competition, and his dad kept making bad jokes to keep things from feeling heavy. Meanwhile, I started getting bills from the hospital. The insurance covered some of it, but there were still deductibles, follow-up appointments, medication, and therapy sessions stacking up. I called my parents to talk about it because I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd help. They didn't answer the first few times. When my mom finally picked up, I explained the situation, listed the costs, told her it was tight since I couldn't work yet. She was quiet for a second, then said, We can't right now. We already gave Matthias some money for the honeymoon, and we still need to help them with the house fund. I thought I misheard. The honeymoon? Well, yes, she said. They just got married. They need support starting their life. You're an adult, Elliot. We can't fund everything. I was sitting there with a brace on my back, metal rods in my leg, pain meds lined up on the table like candy, and they couldn't help because they were paying for Matthias to sit on a beach drinking overpriced smoothies. I told her never mind and hung up. A few days later, they came to visit for the first time since I left the hospital. Walked right into Jackson's parents' living room like they owned the place. My mom started with, "Oh, this is cozy," like we were giving them a tour of an Airbnb instead of me recovering in someone else's house because my own parents couldn't be bothered. Matthias wasn't with them. He was posting honeymoon pictures online. Sunset dinners, boat rides, the works. My dad asked how physical therapy was going. I said fine. He nodded like he was checking a box. Then my mom said, "We've been hearing things from some relatives. They think we ignored you during the wedding." We told them that wasn't true, of course. I looked at her. It was true. It was. She frowned like I'd just insulted her. Elliot, it was Matthias's wedding. People don't understand how much stress we were under. We couldn't be everywhere at once. You didn't show up at all, I said flatly. Dad shifted in his seat. You're making this sound worse than it was. Dad said I was making it sound worse than it was, that I should have played it down for the relatives. I pointed at the brace. Yeah, I was doing great. They didn't like my tone. Mom said I was being dramatic, that accidents happen, but weddings are once in a lifetime. I asked her if she thought spines healed in a week. She changed the subject. After they left, Jackson walked in from the kitchen with a glass of water and asked how it went. I told him they wanted me to stop making them look bad. Unbelievable, he muttered. I started getting messages from cousins after that. Apparently, my parents were telling everyone I was staying with friends because I needed space after the accident, not because they basically abandoned me in the hospital. One aunt called and asked why I didn't come to the wedding at all. I told her I was in surgery while they were cutting the cake. She went silent, then said my parents told a completely different story. Of course they did. Matthias finally called after he got back from the honeymoon. No, how are you? No, sorry about the hospital. He started with, Mom said you've been telling people we ignored you. That's not fair. Not fair? I said. You knew I was in the ICU and didn't even text. I didn't want drama at the wedding, he said like he was the victim. I broke my spine, Matthias. Sorry if that clashed with your playlist. He told me I was bitter. I told him he was selfish. That was our whole conversation. By the end of that month, collections were calling about one of the surgery bills. Because the hospital, the surgeon, and anesthesia all billed separately. My parents still didn't offer to help. They did, however, post pictures from a family barbecue I wasn't invited to. Big smiles, matching shirts, captions about family means everything. I stopped checking their pages after that. What they didn't realize was some of the relatives were starting to ask questions on their own. And I wasn't lying to anyone. I just told the truth. And people didn't like what they heard. The word traveled fast once my cousins started asking questions. I didn't go around starting conversations about it, but when someone called and asked where I'd been the past few months, I told them straight. The accident, the hospital, the wedding, the whole thing. No exaggerations, no yelling, just facts. Some of them didn't believe me at first. My parents had been spinning the story that I skipped the wedding because I was working too much and then needed space, after some argument that never even happened. The moment I told my side, you could hear the shock in their voices. But I didn't have time to worry about what the extended family thought. The bills were stacking up. One afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table in Jackson's parents' house, I opened another envelope marked urgent. Final notice, I read out loud, holding it up for Jackson. He was leaning against the counter, arms crossed. That the surgery bill? Yeah, I said. Insurance covered most, but there's still $5,000 left on this one alone. Physical therapy's another $2. Meds keep adding up too. I laughed without humor. Guess Mom and Dad are busy paying for Matthias's infinity pool or whatever. Jackson frowned. They're really not helping? At all. They said they already gave Matthias money for the honeymoon and house fund, I said, sliding the paper across the table. So no. Apparently me learning to walk again isn't in the budget. He looked at the bill, then at me. Don't stress it right now. Kind of hard not to, I said. He didn't answer. Just picked up the envelope and walked out of the room. That night, Jackson's parents sat down with me after dinner. His dad had the bill in his hand. We're gonna cover this, he said simply. I froze. No, I can't. You can. his mom interrupted, sliding a check across the table. It's a loan. When you're back on your feet, you pay us back. Until then, focus on getting better. I didn't even know what to say. These weren't people swimming in money. They just cared enough to help when my own family didn't. You sure about this? I asked finally. His dad shrugged. It's what family does. That hit harder than I expected. Over the next few weeks, the calls from collections stopped. The hospital confirmed the balance was paid. Jackson's parents never brought it up again. Meanwhile, Jackson became my unofficial physical therapist when the real ones weren't around. He drove me to appointments, sat in the waiting room scrolling on his phone, then walked me back to the car like I was 80 years old. At home, he made me do the boring exercises the PT gave me. Leg lifts, stretches, balancing stuff. If I complained, he threw a pillow at me and told me to shut up. We watched a lot of late-night TV those weeks. Some nights we didn't talk much. Others, we ended up laughing about dumb high school memories until my ribs hurt. It wasn't just the help with the bills. It was the way his family made space for me like it wasn't a favor. Like I belonged there. Matthias texted once during this time. Heard you got the hospital paid off. Guess it wasn't that bad after all. I didn't answer. Because how do you even respond to something like that? As my walking improved, I started doing remote work again. Nothing crazy. Data entry, freelance writing gigs, whatever I could do from the recliner with my laptop propped on pillows. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover my phone bill, meds, and some groceries, so I wasn't draining Jackson's parents completely. I set up a payment plan with them for the hospital loan even though they told me not to rush. His mom said, "We're not worried about it, Elliot." But I was. I didn't want to be someone's permanent charity case. Meanwhile, the family drama kept brewing in the background. One cousin messaged me saying my mom told everyone I refused visitors in the hospital because I was embarrassed about the accident. I told him the truth. Nobody showed up until 3 weeks later. And when they did, they complained about the wedding. Next thing I knew, my aunt called demanding to know why my parents lied. I told her to ask them. One Saturday, Jackson and I were sitting on the porch when he said, "You realize your parents are digging their own grave here, right? They keep lying, people keep finding out. It's on them." I nodded. "Yeah, but they'll blame me when everyone stops taking their side." "Let them," he said. "People see what's real eventually." By the end of that month, I was taking short indoor walks without the cane. Still slow and stiff, but moving. Jackson filmed it on his phone, cheering like I just won a marathon. I sent the video to my parents. No response. By the time summer rolled around, the truth had legs of its own. I didn't push it. I didn't post anything online or start any arguments. But every time someone called or messaged asking where I'd been the last few family events, I told them the same thing. The accident happened 2 days before the wedding. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. No one showed up until after it was over. And when they did, they blamed me for making it awkward. That was it. No insults, no drama, just the facts. And people didn't like what they heard. My cousin Viola was the first to call my parents out. She told me later she asked my mom why nobody knew about the accident. Apparently, my mom said I didn't want anyone to fuss and that I asked for privacy. Viola called BS on the spot. She'd seen the hospital bracelets when she visited me. She knew I couldn't even walk. After that, the calls started piling up. Aunts, uncles, even some family friends. They wanted to hear my side, so I gave it to them. Straightforward. No anger in my voice. The more people heard, the more cracks started showing in my parents' story. There was this annual family barbecue that July. Big deal for my parents. They hosted, loved being the center of attention. Pictures on Facebook, long captions about family traditions. But this year, half the usual crowd didn't show. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Viola sent me a photo someone posted. My parents sitting at a picnic table with empty chairs around them. Matthias there too, looking annoyed. Later that night, he texted me, "You're turning people against us. You need to stop." I stared at the message for a while before replying, "I just answered questions. Not my fault the truth doesn't make you look good." He didn't respond after that. A week later, Matthias's wife Jenny reached out. Said she wanted to meet for coffee. She showed up looking tired, like someone who hadn't slept enough lately. After some small talk, she finally said, "Matthias told me about the accident months later. He made it sound like you were fine the whole time." I told her what really happened. The hospital, the voicemail about the wedding being more important, the bills Jackson's family covered because my own parents refused. Jenny just stared at her cup, shaking her head. "I wish I'd known," she said finally. "I would have come to see you. I thought you didn't want visitors." "That's what they told people," I said. She looked angry, but not at me. One afternoon, My parents came to Jackson's house unannounced. Jackson's dad answered the door while I was doing my PT exercises in the living room. "We need to talk to Elliot," my mom said, like it was urgent. I told them we could meet at the coffee shop down the street instead. No way was I letting them start something in front of Jackson's parents after everything they'd done for me. We met the next day. They sat across from me, both looking serious. My dad started. "You've been telling people things that make us look bad." I leaned back in my chair. I told them what happened. That's all. Mom jumped in. "You're twisting it, making it sound like we abandoned you." "You did abandon me," I said. Calm, even voice, no yelling. "One surgery, I couldn't walk, and you didn't show up because it might ruin the wedding." They didn't like that. My dad said I was ungrateful. My mom said family shouldn't air private matters. "Then maybe you should have acted like family in the first place," I said. Conversation over. Over the next month, things got quiet. My parents stopped calling. Matthias didn't text. But the relatives kept reaching out. Viola told me several of them confronted my parents about the lies. A few even told Matthias to his face that he should have been at the hospital instead of smiling for photos. One uncle apparently canceled on my parents for Thanksgiving, saying he didn't feel right celebrating family with people who don't act like family. I didn't ask for any of this. It just happened. One evening, sitting on the porch with Jackson, I told him about the barbecue, the coffee meeting with Jenny, the relatives pulling away. He nodded slowly. "That's what happens when you keep lying." Eventually, people noticed the smoke. I told him I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted to be left alone. "Doesn't matter," he said. "They built this mess. Now they get to live in it." Late August, Matthias finally texted, "Can we talk?" We met at a diner off the highway. He walked in wearing a polo shirt like he came straight from golf or something, not looking at me until he sat down. "No hello, no, how are you?" "You happy now?" he started, loud enough that the waitress looked over. "Family won't stop calling me. People skipped the barbecue. You made us look like monsters." I stayed calm. "I didn't make you look like anything." I told them what happened. He leaned forward, voice sharp. "No, you spun it so everyone thinks we abandoned you. Like we didn't have a wedding to run, like we weren't under pressure too." "You did abandon me," I said. "The surgery. I see you alone." He shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. "You always do this. Play the victim. Like the whole world's against you. You could have told people you were fine, but no. You let them think we're heartless." I laughed once. "You want me to send a thank you card for ignoring me? Maybe frame the voicemail where Mom said the wedding was more important?" His face tightened. "You know what your problem is? You can't stand that the spotlight wasn't on you. It killed you that my wedding mattered more than your accident. That actually made me blink. You think I fell off scaffolding for attention? Seriously?" He didn't back down. "Wouldn't be the first time you made things harder for everyone else." I stared at him. "I was fighting to walk again while you were on a beach drinking cocktails. Jackson's parents paid my hospital bills because our own parents wouldn't. And you're mad because people finally saw through the perfect little image you built? That's what this is about?" He leaned back, smirking like he won something. "People wouldn't even know if you kept your mouth shut." "Right," I said, "because the truth only counts if it makes you look good. Families stick together." He snapped. "Families show up," I shot back. "Families don't skip the hospital because it clashes with the cake-cutting schedule." His voice rose. "You could have waited. You didn't have to tell everyone." I laughed again, this time shaking my head. "Sorry my accident wasn't convenient for you, Matthias. Next time I'll check your calendar before I break my spine." He slammed his hand on the table, silverware rattling. "You ruined everything. The wedding, the family events, Mom and Dad's reputation. You ruined it," I said, cutting him off. "All I did was stop covering for you." He opened his mouth, ready to fire back, but nothing came out. For a second, he just sat there, jaw tight, like it finally hit him. There was no spin left to hide behind. I dropped some cash on the table for my coffee and stood up. "You wanted the crown, Matthias. Congrats. But don't get mad at me because it's falling apart now." I left him sitting there, red-faced in the middle of the diner, people staring from nearby tables. In early December, Jenny texted me. "We separated for a bit," she wrote. "Matthias is staying at his friend's place." I didn't ask for details. None of my business. But later, Viola said Jenny told a few people she was tired of Matthias playing the victim, tired of him blaming everyone else when the truth caught up. I believed it. That diner conversation showed me all I needed to know about my brother's talent for dodging responsibility. Meanwhile, my life moved on. I kept working remote gigs while finishing physical therapy. By February, I was fully off the cane outdoors. Still stiff sometimes, but nothing like before. Jackson's parents refused every time I tried to start paying them back for the hospital loan. You need time, his dad said. Money can wait. But I set the money aside anyway, month after month, building it up until I could hand them the full amount. When I finally gave them the check in March, his mom hugged me like I'd just come home from war. They didn't make me feel like charity. They made me feel like family. Spring came, and with it came more distance between me and my parents. They tried calling a few times, mostly to talk about how the family felt divided lately. My dad said it like some mysterious outside force had caused it, not their own choices. I told him I wasn't interested in pretending things were fine. If they wanted a relationship, it had to start with owning up to what happened. He said I was being dramatic. I said then we had nothing to talk about. By May, Matthias reached out again, this time in person. He showed up at the park where I was walking laps for exercise. No hello, no small talk, just straight into it. You told people about Jenny leaving? He snapped. I raised an eyebrow. No, Viola mentioned it. Guess word got around. You enjoy this, don't you? His voice was bitter. Everyone treating me like the bad guy while you sit back looking innocent? I kept my hands in my jacket pockets. You made yourself the bad guy, Matthias. I didn't tell you to ignore me in the hospital. I didn't tell you to lie to the family. That was all you. He laughed without humor. You think you're so perfect now? Because people feel sorry for you? Nobody feels sorry for me, I said evenly. They just finally see you for who you are. He didn't like that. One accident, and you act like you're the hero of the story. I looked at him for a long second. No hero here. Just someone who stopped covering for you. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He stood there, jaw tight, then turned and walked off without another word. 2 weeks later, Jenny filed for divorce. Viola told me. Apparently, Jenny said she was tired of his selfishness. Tired of the Golden Boy Act. Tired of carrying the marriage while he played victim about the family drama he caused. Matthias moved back in with my parents after that. The last time I saw them all together was at a cousin's birthday in the next July. I showed up because Viola invited me directly. My parents tried small talk, asking about work, about therapy, about whether I was feeling better these days. I gave short answers and kept eating my cake. Matthias didn't say anything to me at all. Just sat there looking like someone who'd watched his kingdom crumble one brick at a time. I left early, walking out into the warm evening air. My legs felt steady. My back didn't ache as much anymore. On the way home, I passed a construction site. New scaffolding, bright warning signs, workers in harnesses double-checking bolts before climbing. I stopped for a second, watching them work. Then I kept walking, because that part of my life was over. The accident, the lies, the drama, none of it was mine to carry anymore. I had my health back. I had people who showed up when it mattered. The rest could fall apart without me. And it did. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.